Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Ryan Stick Show. Tonight on the show, we have Matthew Kelly from the Geekscape Network. He also co-hosts a podcast that I really like called the One Hit Thunders and also the massively successful horror movie night. I have a theme song. I'm going to play it right now.
The Ryan Stick Show.
Short, brief, and to the point. Now we're going to bring on Matthew Kelly. Matthew Kelly, the man of many names that I can make up with Matt. I'm going to call him Matty right now. How's it going, Matt?
Hey,
How's it going, dude?
I'm good. Maddie is something I've been called by many a person. So go for it. Take it. Own it. Let it be
Awesome.
yours.
All right, let's put a Matt and a dash and a T, and that could be your rap name as well. It's gonna be a great night. We're gonna discuss a lot of things, including our rap names. But first of all, I love your shows, and
Thank you.
discover them backwards through your partner in crime, Chris. How do you pronounce Chris's last
Valios.
name?
So
Yeah.
spoiler alert for the
Yeah.
first every episode of One Hit Thunder, you hear my voice come in at the very end, and I say like, "Hey, you've been listening to One Hit Thunder, hosted by Chris Valios." For the first 5 episodes, I say his name wrong, and he was like,
Oh.
dude, it's pronounced this. So for I have a script that I read from. For
Yeah.
at least 3 months, it was sound spelled for the last name, because it's the downside. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about with the name Ryan Stick. When you have a name like Matt Kelly that literally any human being can just look at and understand, you have no understanding of the pain of an awkward last name. It
Well,
doesn't.
no, I do. Stick is bullshit. It
Oh,
is a
well.
bullshit last name, ladies and gentlemen. My last name is extremely French, and my dad's a martial artist who's been in the game for 50 years. And through various decades of people calling the house and never getting his name right, I said to myself, I need something that's going to be a little easier to spell and a
Well, there
little
you go.
easier to be pronounced. Anyway, Matt, I love the shows. And horror movie nights is great. It's you and your co-host. It's a blast just hearing you guys both decimate yet appreciate all these horror classics that I know and love. And it's funny because when you guys, even if you guys lightly tear apart a movie that I love, if you love a movie enough, seeing its spots and where the duct tape is makes it more endearing to me.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, the
Yeah.
way that we've described that show, I would say the early years, we would say oh, you know, we're the podcast that just tears down your favorite movies. And that gets old really quick. And we've been doing this show for 7 years. And it also isn't fun to watch purposely bad movies for 7 straight years. So
No.
the way we started selling it a little bit more was we make fun of the movies you love that aren't great. You know what I mean? Deep down, I love Sleepaway Camp. Sleepaway Camp is one of my favorite movies of all time. There's a poster
Me too.
literally right there.
Oh,
And
sick.
and it is a bad movie. It is a bad movie with so many flaws and so many errors. There's literally a point where a dude shows up and his mustache is electrical tape on his face. It is as low budget as a low budget movie can be, but that is the charm of that movie. So I don't know, when someone watches that movie and they're like, wow, that was bad, that sucked. And I'm like, I think you missed the point on why that movie's great, is because it's bad. If that movie was passable or good, it wouldn't be worth watching.
That's true. You're describing punk rock to me.
100%. It's
Good
sloppy.
old fashioned punk rock. Yeah. Every time I hear in a Misfits song, the guitar fucks up, I'm like, yeah, it's real, not this processed garbage.
Well,
And
that's
it's,
I
yeah,
grew up on Trauma, and Trauma is
same.
the most punk rock horror company. You know what I mean? It's so DIY. There's something so charming about those movies that really, there's a thin line, right? Because I don't give a crap about a Sharknado movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to see people spend $1 million and have a huge talented crew with the intention of making it look like they didn't know what they were doing. That
Yeah.
doesn't excite me. But give me something like Spookies or Demon Wind, where it's no, these people really believed that they were making a good movie and they just didn't have any of the expertise or talent to do it. There's something really charming in that to me. There's something where the effort is so strong that it's how do you not absolutely love it?
I totally agree. And just to bring back punk rock, I remember being a teenager and seeing people buy $300 or $400 leather jackets with, fuck society and capitalism written on said jacket. I'm like, I think you're missing the point here. And I remember distinctly getting a new pair of boots, and someone's like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna scuff them up." I'm like, I think life's gonna do that if I live it correctly.
Yeah.
You know, my clothes will look like shit in due time, the old fashioned way, not just because it's cool. And I totally feel you with that Sharknado stuff. It always feels, even though I'm sure Ian Ziering is you know, in all the power to him, man. You found a second life in entertainment. That's awesome. I'd love to talk to you about the pronunciation of your name. But in general, it always did kind of seem kind of like crappy on purpose, and that's reminds me of bands that I don't like when they're like, "Look, isn't it cool to suck?" And it's
Yeah.
just like, nah, no, bands that suck that are trying their best, you could always kind of tell. It's the same thing with movies too. And I love
100%.
Trauma. Yeah.
One of my my number one band of all time, it's been my favorite band since I was probably like 14 years old, is this ska band Five Iron Frenzy.
Mm.
And like, if you buy their first live album, their hidden track, the hidden track on that album is a 10-minute mega cut mashup of every mess up during the shows that they recorded for that live album. And I was like, that is how you own it. Like, it was literally just like, hey, here's all the times that we screwed up or forgot the words or weren't paying attention and missed when we were supposed to come in. And it is like, it's really funny to just listen to these bands completely blow it on their live album. It's like they could have kept that hidden. They could have like went into a studio to make sure that every song sounded perfect, but they're like, no, you got to keep the screw ups too. Like that's just part of being a live band, just playing fast, crazy music. Like you're gonna
Yeah.
screw up.
Something I love about your podcast, man, and you even said in a post earlier today, and I'm just like, Matt Kelly is my spirit animal, is when you're like, the three M's in life is music, movies, and Muppets.
Yep.
And I couldn't say it better. I'm like, I just directed a music video that's coming out soon by a band called the Pivot Tones that involves all of those things,
Love
and
it.
it's in my DNA. It's in my DNA. Let's go back in history a bit. I want to find out about Matt Kelly, the person. How did you first discover like podcasts and were able to take these loves, these three M's, and do something with all the knowledge I'm sure you acquired in your life? And you said to yourself, what can I possibly do with these three M's all in one medium? And you're doing it. You're living a dream. Tell me of the legend of Matt Kelly.
So it started so weird. When I was a little kid, I wanted to be a filmmaker. And that still kind of exists a little bit in the back of my head. I'm always coming up with ideas for like a TV show or a movie I'd like to make. Um, but it just, I have a problem with overthinking things. So like I had written scripts that people had liked and we were going to go film it and we were going to like launch a Kickstarter campaign. And then like right at the 0 hour, I would get cold feet and be like, the script's not good enough yet. I got to rewrite it. And then like nothing would happen. And I would always like get in my own way. But it actually dates all the way back to sophomore year of college. It was like late 2005 ish, maybe
Mm,
early 2006. And I had gotten my first ever Mac laptop. And I was at school and I'd heard about this podcasting thing. And at the time, there was like maybe 15 podcasts in the world. It was not a lot, and most of them were video podcasts.
yeah.
And I found this show called Geekscape, which was hosted by this music video director, Jonathan London, who had he had like a really well received horror short that was playing like a bunch of film festivals, and that had led to him directing music videos for like Reggie and the Full Effect and Real Big Fish and Punchline and all of these bands that I liked. And he was hosting this podcast, and it was only his like fourth episode, and it was him talking to this other music video director. And basically, they were, from the vibe that I got from the conversation, they were like the go-to guys for Drive Through Records. Was like Drive Through wanted to use these two guys specifically. And it was very clear that they were in Los Angeles, but they kept referencing stuff from Philly, where I'm from. So
Mm,
being that it was like the late MySpace, early Facebook days, I stalked Jonathan. And I
as you
sent him,
do.
and I just sent him messages and I was like, hey, I just found your podcast. How the hell do you know the band Don't Look Down? Like, I know that band never got signed anywhere. Like, they were kind of just like a local Philly band, but you're LA based. And he's like, oh, I went to college in Philly. They were like one of the first bands I ever worked with, blah, blah, blah. So a friendship was bonded between him and I. And he was like, you should do a podcast. So I did with my friend Jeff, and it was bad. And basically, for about 9 years, I would start a podcast, maybe get about 10 to 15 episodes into it, and then it wasn't working for me, and it would go away. But then I did this show called The St. Mort Show, and that was like the first like kind of successful podcast I ever did. Um, and the St. Mort Show came from that was my I played I was a acoustic comedy act for a while, and that was my stage name was St. Mort. So I was like, okay, it's the St. Mort Show, and very ambitious podcast. Like
Okay.
I think it's a great idea for a podcast, and it's a great experiment. If I still have a bunch of the old files available, if you just search for it, you can hear it. It's not good. It's very dated. It's definitely like what a 22-year-old thinks is funny type humor. So I don't like I'm like, this is like in there's a world where someone could try to cancel me on some of the jokes that I thought were really funny in my 20s. But
Well well, yeah, but that's all the whole point of growing up. Like, I think that's
exactly.
what society has forgotten about is people's ability to evolve.
To
And
evolve, exactly,
you're
and
if
that would
you're
be
not
my response to that is like,
you
let's compare the last
yeah.
15 years to those 5. But the idea for the show, which only lasted about 15 years or 15 episodes before I was like, "Yeah, we gotta scrap this," was that it was going to be a audio podcast version of a late night talk show. So once a week, I would do a 3-minute monologue, I would have 2 guests and a musical performance, and then I would record a bunch of fake commercial ads to put in between every segment, and it was so much work. Like, and I was like, how the hell did the guy who couldn't get like a script made because he got too anxious about it? How
Yeah.
was I able to like keep putting in all this effort? And I knew some of the stuff was like, this isn't funny, but I have to have a commercial in this episode, so it's going out. Um, Slowly that turned into just doing interviews and having conversations. Um, and all the while, this was like Jonathan from Geekscape was like, we'll put it on the Geekscape network. If you make a podcast, we'll put it on the Geekscape network. So for a long time, Geekscape was just his podcast and my podcast. And towards the end of the St. Mort stuff, I knew that I loved doing podcasting, but I wasn't having any spark of joy from that. Good old Reddit came around, and I
Okay.
was on R Horror on Reddit, and
Yeah.
someone was like, "We should have a movie club where we all watch a movie together." And I said, "I'll put it together, and I'll even put together a weekly podcast where we'll discuss the movie. Like the person who picked the movie will come on and discuss it." So we started Our Horror Club was our subreddit, and for a while that like subreddit had a couple thousand people in it, and it just kept building up this steam. And for a while it was me and my friend Miguel, and
Yeah.
then Miguel was running he runs an amazing film festival out in San Diego called the Horrible Imaginings Film Festival. um, that was starting to like really build up steam, and he was getting ready to start a family, and there was a whole bunch of things happening in his life. So one of the guys from Reddit Horror Club that had been a guest on whenever it was his picks, I'd become really good friends with this guy, Scott. So I asked Scott to fill in for me or fill in for Miguel. And then Scott and I clicked real quick and we became really good friends. And it was like, whereas with Miguel, I love Miguel. I'm actually going to see Miguel this weekend because I'll be in LA for the LA Comic Con. But like with Miguel, it was very like business, like we watched the movies on our own. We showed up, we recorded, we talked, and then we bounced off the call. Um, Scott, we would like record a half-hour episode and then just shoot the shit for an hour and a half. Like we'd be on like a 2-hour call for a 30-minute episode. Um, and then we had this other dude who, whenever it was his movie pick, was always so funny and sarcastic and snarky. This dude, Adam.
Mm.
So we were like, let's add a third person to like liven up the conversations. And we brought in Adam. And very quickly, that's when we discovered that we really hate it when people picked good movies because we couldn't have as much fun talking about them. Um,
Okay.
and that was the day that Reddit Horror Club died and Horror Movie Night was born. We were like, we've got to start our own podcast that's just the three of us where we're picking the movies and it's just going to be trash and we're just going to really have fun with the trash. Um, and I'm not going to air anybody's shit at this point, but Adam was going through a rough patch, we'll say, and it was becoming really difficult to work with him. So after about 2
Okay.
years of Adam being on the show, he took a leave, and we brought in my brother, and my brother's been our third co-host until literally this week. He's taking a 6-month break, and we're adding a new co-host, guy Kyle Kuthka, who's been a documentary filmmaker, super talented dude, super funny. And then whenever my brother's ready to come back into the show, we'll just be a 4-piece from that point on. But that show's been going for 7 strong years. Really nice grassroots audience from that. Like,
Of course.
I would travel all over. I'd go to San Diego Comic-Con every year, handing out trading cards. We wouldn't do business cards. We would make
Nice.
replicas of trading cards that we would give people. And then I would go up and down the East Coast. Did conventions as far up as Maine and as far south as Virginia, just hopping in my car, driving there with t-shirts and just, promoting the podcast as much as I possibly could. So that really helped. I mean, if you really want to make this shit happen, like, grassroots is the way to go. And about a year or so ago, I really started to get the bug to do more podcasts. So I was working at a desk job, and 2 of my coworkers were just absolutely, like, super great conversations, really funny, and they both love Disney. So we came up with this idea of doing the first ever explicit Disney podcast.
Okay.
So we had a podcast called Disneydo, where literally they would just get drunk on wine and talk about Disney stuff. And that had a pretty good following for a while. That show kind of went away. We're thinking about maybe bringing it back as like a seasonal, like once every 4 months type thing. We'll kind of just do it like, hey, here's where we're at with like Disney stuff. Um, but they're now the
Yeah.
hosts of a show called The Roaring Twenties that I produce, where it's a guide to surviving your 20s during the 2020s. And it's just them sharing embarrassing shit that happened to them when they were in their 20s. My sister wanted a podcast, so I helped her launch a podcast called My Favorite Episode Of, where each week a different guest would come on and talk about their favorite episode of their favorite TV show. That went really well until she got pregnant, and then she was like, I can't do this anymore. So that show's pretty much, I would say it's on hold, but I don't think it's going to actually really come back, because her co-host now has an amazing podcast called Bingetown TV, where they break down week by week. They'll watch whatever the biggest fantasy show is on streaming. So I think right now they're doing Wheel of Time and the new season of Dexter, but they've been like getting to the point where like all of the stars from all of these shows want to be on their podcast to talk with them. It's the quickness in which she grew that show is unbelievable. So like Bingetown TV, huge recommend, even though I have nothing to do with it. But through Jonathan, through Geekscape, like I became friends with Chris from Punchline. So then he was someone that I was like, you should be doing a podcast. And I pitched him One Hit Thunder. And then, my buddy Dylan was a huge Christmas nerd. So I was like, you should do a Christmas podcast. So I do a Christmas podcast with him. So
Oh,
Christmas,
dude, that's amazing. I
yeah,
love Christmas, talking
Christmas
Christmas, anything.
365 all year round. We talk Christmas. So
Awesome, man.
it's just, so right now I'm directly producing 5 shows for the network.
Mm,
The Geekscape network's now up to 18 shows. It started as just Jonathan's show and my show,
okay.
which I take a lot of pride in, even that. The fact that we were able to grow it in such a way. And then beyond that, so I produce 5 of them. Jonathan produces his show, but then I would give myself credit as like podcast scout / executive producer for about 5 more of the shows. Just finding shows out in the wild, bringing Bingetown onto the Geekscape network, just because I knew that the host Kathleen was such a talent. And I was like, we need to have her on this network. My favorite show that I found for the network, and I'll tell everybody about it, is this show 91 Donkey Lane. It's an all improv fantasy podcast based out of Boston. It's this dude Nate Lopez and Robert Bacon. These 2 guys are legitimately 2 of the funniest people I've ever met in my entire life, and they're part of the Boston improv scene. And every week they bring in a different person from the improv scene, and they're just 2 roommates who live in a magical apartment, and their friends voice different mythical creatures that wander in and out of the apartment while they're living there. And it's literally laugh out loud insanity. So I'm very proud that I was able to get those guys to come to the network. And then, there's just other shows I help out. I Love Trash is one that I'm helping out with, which is a comedian out of Chicago, just talking about trashy TV and reality television and Hallmark Christmas movies and all that other good trashy stuff that we all love. So that's the very long-winded version of like my journey into podcasting.
um, my my girlfriend, well, we've been together for like 10.5 years, so I call her
Show
my
off.
wife, but I call her my wife. But she was on a show, a Canadian sitcom, for teens called Radioactive back in the day, and she acted
Okay.
with a gentleman named Andrew Walker. Now, Andrew Walker is in like, I don't know, like 20 Hallmark Christmas movies, and he seems to be like the guy that every time you see a Hallmark parody of some kind, like Canadian handsome Chris Bearstick, we always think it's kind of nods at him and stuff. But another friend of hers, named Olivier Renault, is in two Christmas movies coming out this year called
Nice.
Loving Christmas and Christmas on Park Avenue. And it's insane that I've kind of turned my nose up to all these Hallmark and Lifetime Christmas movies, but the abundance of Christmas films they can produce on a yearly basis is astronomical. Like, I know it's all kind of carbon copies of each other, including with the
But it
down to the
works.
poster, but it
Yeah.
works. Yeah.
It works, and it's like, you know what? You can shit on that stuff all you want. Like, I have a friend who's directed a couple Lifetime movies, and it's like, you get your foot in that door, your career is set for life. You might not become the next Steven Spielberg or anything, but you will always have work being offered to you if they like you. So, like, you know, they're keeping more indie filmmakers employed than most companies out there, honestly.
And it's great to be, I'm not sure, how old are you, Matt?
36, and that's very rude of you to ask.
30, 30, 30, 37.
Perfect. Yeah, that totally makes
Yeah, yeah,
sense. We sync up on so much stuff. I think that's because we just have
I
lived the
know.
same lives.
Down to the cartoon series. That's why I'm like,
Yeah.
fuck, I gotta get Matt on this show. Like, we're the same guy. So anyway, why I'm bringing this up is actually, no, I've completely forgot. There you go.
Some about a cartoon series, but we were talking about
Yep.
filmmaking too. But
Filmmaking, exactly. Yes, thank you, thank you very much. Oh, you're so handy. You're a producer extraordinaire. You could really tell. I'm sure, like, I'm not the only other person that you've had to, like, reel back in. Yeah, the thing about that is, like, when you're fucking 20 years old, you're like, I am never going to sell out. I'm never going to do this. I'm going to do that. It's my ideals, man. But then when you get to the age where you're just like, it would be fucking amazing to do something I love for a living and get up every single day and just do something and pay the bills with something I enjoy doing. And it's funny how our own restraints we put on ourselves because we all think we're going to be the next Steven Spielberg or
yeah,
the next, like, great punk band that's going to change the system, man. It's like, it's awesome to be this age because I'm so much more open to the changes that life would have. And if someone offered me a Hallmark movie, I'd say yes immediately,
yeah. Well,
But
and that's
20-year-old
like,
me would be like, fuck no. Yeah.
so it's kind of funny. You said something that I've been thinking about a lot because
Mm,
I also started a company with Chris, called We Know Podcasting, which is like an editing for hire service, but also like we'll design a logo for you, we'll write a theme song for you, pretty much anything you could ever need for a podcast. And early on, the people who are going to be using that service, anytime you start any company, it's just like whatever client we can get, we're going to take. You know what I mean? And then slowly you're like, all right, maybe we should kind of, as my friend Jim says, there's riches and niches. So like
mm,
finding that like niche audience. So obviously Chris and I's passions kind of overlap where it's like, hey, if someone wants to do a pop culture, music, movie podcast, something like that, like I'm all in. Like, please let us help you.
mm,
But early on, we were getting a lot of entrepreneur podcasts, and the entrepreneur podcast world is absolutely fascinating. But what I kept finding myself getting frustrated with is like, you have these people and they're talking to these people who are millionaires, in some cases even like self-made billionaires, and they have all of these tips on like how to play the stock market, how to do this, that, and the other thing to like retire early. And I'm sitting there just being like, I just want to know how I can make about $3,000 to $4,000 a month so I can do what I love full time. Like,
mm.
it's like
Oh,
the
three
idea of,
grand.
you know what I mean? Like, it's like the idea of like
Mm,
retiring early is like I would be so bored. Like I need to constantly be busy and
mm,
working. So like I just want to, yeah, I think we're all just sort of like, look, as long as I can just do what I love doing and it like pays the bills just enough, like
yeah.
that's all I need. Like I don't know. I think it's so crazy that there's so many people that are really gunning for that. Like, I want to retire before I'm 40. And it's like, if I can like make just a couple more dollars a month doing what I'm doing right now and just kind of live a very like vanilla, peaceful life in my house, like I won. Like
Yeah.
I can do this until I'm 80. Like I'm fine with that. So it's very interesting how there is that divide. And I think it's the difference between like someone who's very creative minded and someone who's very like logical minded. Is like us creatives, we could live 2 years off of ramen and like barely paying any bills, but if we get to make like one project during that time, it feels like it was all worth it, right? Like,
Mhm.
there's, I don't know. I was raised on the school of watching documentaries about how Kevin Smith made Clerks. You know what I mean? Like that was like, all
I
right, that's
love
what
that
I want.
snowball effect, man. Oh
Dude,
my god.
amazing. I used to,
Yeah.
whenever I was down, that was like the thing I would put on. I'd be like, all right, let me remind myself how Kevin Smith pulled this shit together. And like that Clerks X DVD set is like one of the best purchases I've ever made in my entire life. It's so
Same.
good. Oh my
Same.
God.
I remember Kevin Smith's inspired me a few times in my life, and pivotal ones too, where my dad and I had we still do, but we did it much more often a few years ago. We had a podcast called Two On and Son, in which we get together and I'd ask him about his life and martial arts and stuff. And at that point, my dad and I talked, but we never talked that much. And when you push record, you are talking to each other for a straight hour.
Yeah.
And you don't know how much you talk to someone during a year, or if you have the ability to talk to somebody for a straight hour every week and make sure it's fresh. And we realized we had that niche together. And that was really cool. And that's all because of his podcast. But when I was a teenager, of course, Clerks inspired me to become a video editor, because Clerks was so accessible and it
Yeah.
was so, not intimidating. Like, this could happen. But another time he inspired me is, oh my God, those Evening with Kevin Smith DVDs
Yeah.
were just so life changing. Like, he was just on stage talking for an hour, telling stories. I'm like, God, if I could ever get to that point where that's what you can do for a living, I would die
100%.
poor. Yeah,
I said that a million
happy.
times. Because I remember I was talking to my friend and he's like, I feel like you want to be a filmmaker, but you don't want to be a filmmaker. You're like, you're not hungry enough. Like, you're not like, and and I was like, I think I realized that I wanted to be a filmmaker just because I really wanted to like tour colleges and talk for an hour on stage. And
Yeah,
then
ditto.
podcasting was like, hey, here's a way to do that. So that's the next step. I mean, the pandemic has been going a lot longer than I ever thought it was going to be going, but I hope, fingers crossed, it's something that I keep bringing up with Chris. Like, I would love to do even just like a weekend, the occasional weekend or like 5-day tour of One Hit Thunder, like up and down a coast or something. Um,
Yeah,
I don't
and it's
think
a
our show's
great show.
quite there. Yeah, I think it's just, but there's that like, how many downloads are you getting? Can you even like, what
Mm,
are the venue options? Like, I obviously wouldn't want to like try to play, a big like 2-3 thousand seater
yeah.
spot, but like, I don't know. I think we could fill, like, if we did like a couple like 50 to 100 seat places, I think that we could do it. Like, like you feel like that confidence. You're like, maybe this could happen. Maybe maybe I could make this happen.
Of course. And I know for a fact, me personally, and I ever since YouTube came out, it was amazing to be like, oh my God, I edited something and someone can see it. Like,
Yeah,
before YouTube, I remember distinctly making a horror film over a weekend. My parents were out of town, and just having fun, throwing it together. Total Evil Dead is my other inspiration. Like, Clerks and Evil Dead, that was, neck and neck of this can happen. Sam Raimi, Kevin Smith.
yeah,
And I remember throwing it together and putting on at a party and trying to convince the 9 or so people that were half drunk to look at the TV at the same time. And
yeah.
just the amazing feeling of people are going to watch what I made. So then YouTube comes out and I'm like, oh my God, hundreds of people, 20 people might see what I made. That's amazing. And so quickly did my brain turn to, oh God, only 20 people
Oh my
fucking
god.
watch this.
Don't even get me started. Like Geekscape,
Uh,
we started a Geekscape YouTube channel, which is Geekscape TV. If anybody's watching this, hey, swing over to Geekscape TV, give us a subscribe. And I was like, let's do some videos. And like, it was kind of just anything goes. So like, we did kind of a little bit of the Watch Mojo thing of top 10 lists because
Mm.
supposedly they're good generators for people to like find your shit. But we also did stuff like Why We Love, where like a different person would talk for 5-10 minutes about why they love a specific thing on the anniversary of its release. And, we would do the history of and debates and all types of different stuff. And it was like we had like one of our first videos was Why We Love Adult Swim, and that thing
Mm.
did like a couple like 2,000 something downloads in a day. And I was like,
Congratulations.
yeah, I was like, yeah, this is it, we've made it. And then like the rest of the videos do like 50, which is like still exciting, but to me I'm just like, can't even do 100. Like it's like you just
I
can't,
know.
like, you set that number. And that was a big struggle with me, like
Yeah.
early in my life. I when I was in college, while I was doing the podcasting, I also started doing these charity events called Chords for a Cure, where every month we would book like 8 bands, and it would be a $5 show, and 100% of the money from the door would be donated to a different children's charity every month. Um, and it didn't matter how successful that show was. Like we could do a show and it would raise $600, and I would be like, why wasn't it 700? You know what I mean? Like it was just like, so I've been really trying to work on like that. It's tough, but like being thankful for what you are doing as opposed to what you aren't. Um, but man,
Hey,
sit at the same time, you look at your bank account sometimes and you look at like your download numbers and you know how much time you're putting into like making this thing work. And it's real hard to not think about what you're not doing right. You know what I mean? So
of course, man. It happens with every creative process. I played in bands for 20 years, and there was always some other band that I wish I was in, or some other band that seemed to be getting all the success. And as soon as I decided I wasn't going to be a musician anymore, like I still play. Sometimes I play once a year, do Christmas charity stuff. As soon as I discovered, like, said to myself the words, "I'm not going to be a rock star anymore," I started to really enjoy it a lot more. But fuck, that was a process to
yeah.
let go, to let
But I
go. Yeah.
but I think that there's also a definition. Like I think sometimes people need to redefine their definition of success. I think it goes back to what I was saying with the entrepreneur podcasts, right? Like if your definition of success is like I want to be the next Green Day, that might not be achievable. Like I don't want to be like a naysayer. I'm sure someone out there will be the next Green Day, but there's
I
only
don't
going
think
to be.
anyone's ever been the next Green Day, to be honest,
I feel
as
like
much as
Blink
people have
came
tried.
close. I think Blink came really close, but you know what I
Yeah.
mean. Like but like if your perspective is like I want to be the biggest band on a small indie label, that's
Mhm.
achievable. Like I want to be the local band that can sell out any venue in town. That's achievable. Hell, I know so many people who are in some of the most talented bands I've ever seen play live who their passion to do music full time, they form like wedding and cover bands to pay the bills, and like they're making more money than I've made at a desk job. You know what I mean? Like there's ways that you can achieve your dream in an adjacent way, where you're still feeling like you're doing what you love to do, even if it's not exactly how you imagined it would be.
Absolutely. My girlfriend and I, we started this YouTube channel called Spookeasy Manor. And the first episode, like, got a few hundred views and stuff. And the other episodes have been a little scarce. And at some point, we're like, oh, man, that's such a bummer. Like, no one's watching. But then you got to remember, and I always got to remind myself, the people that are watching, these are human beings
Yeah.
with birthdays and parents and things to do. And they chose to watch or listen to whatever you made
Yep.
instead of doing something else with their day, and that is fucking beautiful.
It's amazing. Well, and
Yeah.
also like I think that there's also that element where you have to count your blessings of the things that you have, right? And I have this struggle. I've always struggled with mental health. It's something that's very important to me to talk about whenever I have an opportunity to. I really
Mhm.
think actually talking about horror movie night, I think horror movie night really started to catch its audience like 5 years into the show's run when all
Mm.
three of us talked more about our struggles because my brother is now 7 years sober, but like had a really long period where he was doing everything under the sun. So like that, me with my depression, Scott struggles with depression, like
Mm.
talking about those things is so important. It's so important to not be afraid to talk about that. And so like it's remembering those little blessings, it's remembering those little things. And then the flip side is like, I have a new show that I just started producing recently and I absolutely love it. And because I've been very lucky with stuff like One Hit Thunder, Christmas 365, and Horror Movie Night being like just right out the door, like super successful podcasts, like by most podcast standards, very successful. This
Yeah.
new show isn't doing as amazing, but it's like it's still the podcast I want to listen to. And like that's like my end thing is like I'll keep doing this until I'm not interested in listening to more episodes of Horror Movie Night, One Hit Thunder, and all these other shows. But
Mhm.
if your listeners do want to help out the downloads on this new show, check out the podcast Before My Time with Kelsey Laurie, which is a weekly podcast in which a former Circus Olay performer turned stunt woman, Kelsey Laurie, sits
Mhm.
down with different people to talk about something they love that came out decades before they were born. We've covered stuff like Some Like It Hot, the concept of retrofuturism, the show MASH. So, like, I think it's a really fun show. I think it's a really entertaining show. And I do think it's going to catch its audience soon, but it's definitely not as like Christmas 365, you know exactly what you're stepping into. Like
Gotcha.
Horror
Gotcha.
Movie Night, like I think as much as I like the name and it's the best name for the show, I don't think it's a name that like pulls people in immediately without them really hearing like the soft pitch on what it is. So
Gotcha. Gotcha.
yeah, and that's podcasting 101. Make sure that a name matters sometimes. It really helps when it's like this is what this show is, period. And like Horror Movie Night, it's great. If my literally my co-host Scott was like tell me how his cousin was getting into podcasting and he went to search for Horror Movie Night and he's like, all I had to type in was horror M and our thing was the top result. And he's
Awesome,
like, that
man.
made me feel so fucking good. He's like, it made me feel so fucking good. Like I was like, holy shit, this many people care about us that we're like making our way up the Apple podcast search results just by like searching the word horror. It's like already locked and loaded. I'm like, yeah, man, it's fucking awesome. Like never in a million years did I think anyone would care. And like even getting to do conventions and like every convention I go to, there's always at least one or two people who know who we are and they want to talk to us. And my favorite thing is that they want to talk to us about their mental health struggles, right? Like
Mm.
they'll reference some of the funny stuff that's happened on the show. They'll playfully yell at us for hating a movie that they loved or whatever. But like at the end of the day, it's talking to us about like how our podcast got them through their divorce or how like a death in the family, like they put on our show to laugh and like how important it was to them to hear guys not afraid to talk about like their struggles with stuff. And that to me is like that's what it's all about. Like yes, obviously I'm trying to do this as a full-time career. Money is something that I will always be excited when it comes my way, but like
Mhm.
money can't money can't pay for moments like that where you're like, oh my God, I saved somebody's life by making dick and fart jokes about, Troll 2. Like, you don't think about things in those terms, but like, it's crazy how what draws people to your content and like what difference. It's the same thing what you were saying where it's like, hey, there might only be 20 people watching, but those 20 people have families and lives and friends. And for whatever reason, they're into the stupid shit that I'm doing. And like, there is something really wholesome about that.
Yeah, I remember when I first started playing, yeah, in bands, we, didn't have a zillion people at the shows at first, nor when we stopped. But it's interesting that the crowd we did get ended up starting a bunch of bands. And that
Yeah,
was really, and in hindsight, that's actually kind of cool to make an impression on a small amount of people as opposed to be completely indifferent to a vast amount of people. Like, and
100%.
and it's kind of it's kind of funny. I've never been in this spot where like I get 10,000 views and then I can have that fall from grace feeling where it's just like, oh no, where the 10,000 views go?
Yeah.
I'm actually kind of glad, not glad, but I'm definitely. I do
It's
have one video though on YouTube, interview with Matthew Gray Goobler with my old YouTube series full of terrible jokes that we were talking about,
yeah.
like that were very in vogue in 2010 and not now. In which I interview Matthew Gray Gubler of Criminal Minds, and that's got 300,000 views for some fucking
It's
reason,
so insane, and you
but
never like
nothing.
that. And that's the thing, and that's like the argument that I sometimes have with myself with even like the Geekscape YouTube channel is all is that the new interviewee?
Yeah, he's causing a bunch of shit behind the scenes, so it's probably going to be better if I just hold him up here.
I mean, that might help the views too. If people are just scrolling
Mhm.
by and they see a cute ass dog, I mean, I'd stop and watch. but, but yeah, like the with the Geekscape TV, there is that argument, right? It's like, do you go for doing say one episode a week
Mm,
on there because the numbers aren't exactly amazing and people aren't necessarily clamoring for your content, or do you do two or three a week because you're hedging the bet that like one of these three things might click with somebody that causes them to share it and causes more people to see your channel, and when they do
absolutely.
come to see your channel, you've got 50-60 videos for them to look at. Like, it is that double-edged sword.
I only discovered Hollywood Babylon when they were at it for 3 years.
Yeah.
And and I'm a huge Kevin Smith fan, so logistically speaking, why the fuck wouldn't I know about Fat Man on Batman
Yeah.
until so far in? And discovered Fat Man on Batman like within its first year, but when I fell fucking hard. I was like, oh my god, he's interviewing all these people from Batman the animated series and all these stories you never get to hear. And because unless you buy a behind the scenes featurette and the editor decides to put it in, some of these stories you would have never heard of. And
Yeah.
that's the beauty of podcast, because
It's
it's the most deepest well you could fall into when it comes to something you love.
Yeah. Well, and it's like two of
Mm,
Christmas 365 and One Hit Thunder right now, for reasons that I don't fully understand. I haven't found what started this, but in the last 3 months, both of those podcasts have almost quadrupled their downloads. And the biggest thing I can attribute to that is like, both of those shows have pretty deep back catalogs at this point. There's
mm,
almost 100 episodes of One Hit Thunder, and there's over 50 episodes of Christmas 365. And I think that means that like when people do find the show and they listen to it, they like it enough to be like, all right, well, I'm going to go and listen to the other 99 episodes of this show now. Um, so it's like there is something to be said about like if you have that back catalog, like you said, when people fall, sometimes they fall hard. I don't think there's been a podcast that I've discovered that I didn't decide I was going to go back and start from the beginning and get caught up on every single episode. I think the only time I didn't do that was my brother, and me. And that was because it was like 500 and something episodes at that point. But like you do like constantly. And yeah, sometimes you get intimidated. I won't lie. I worry with horror movie night that now that we're like nearing episode 350, that I'm like, man, I know that if I found a podcast and there was 350 episodes, I would be like, ugh, there's too much, and I just wouldn't even give it a shot. But like, I
mm.
know just as many people who are like, no, that makes me excited because that means that if I like this show, I've got like 3 to 4 months worth of podcast content that I can look forward to. So like, I don't know, you never know what people's perspectives are going to be. I say that I think that quantity is never a bad thing in the digital age.
No, and also, I mean, when I was looking at horror movie nights, I was kind of like I was scrolling down and I was kind of picking and choosing things that were speaking to me, because I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to jump in right now, I can listen to everything eventually.
Yeah.
But I have the option right now of just picking and choosing, like, here and there which ones I like. And yeah, I really liked the banter. When it comes to picking your hosts and stuff like that, do you just pick someone because they're your friend, or do you really feel if there's a kinetic energy between you guys and it will make great shows? Because I'm sure you're a producer and you're not going to just put someone in there because you know them. They got to have what it takes, correct?
No, 100%. Like, the big irony is like all of my best friends are podcast listeners. Like
Mm,
like I have a group of college friends who I have not lost touch with since I was 18 years old. And then I've got another group of friends that I've known since high school. And I've never really produced a podcast with any of them.
mhm,
Like, but they listen and they love
mhm.
the show and they're very supportive. And a few of them, I'm like, hey, if you find a thing, like there are people where I'm like, I can tell by their personality they would absolutely crush it at
Mhm.
podcasting. But like my brother, when we brought my brother on the show, we had if there's a point in horror movie night, it's like a 6-month period where every episode is Scott and I with a different revolving co-host door because we
Yeah.
were basically doing auditions. We were like, let's bring on the people that we both enjoy, that we think are funny, and see how well they gel. And like the irony is it came down to Brian and my friend Kyle. And
Mm.
we went with my brother, even though part of us was like, let's not go with Brian because people will think it's nepotism.
Yeah.
But like, it was just like, I think it's going to make more sense with Brian than Kyle because Kyle's like a filmmaker and he's always on the move and he might be hard to schedule around and blah, 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 blah. And now the irony is Kyle's the replacement for Brian. And then it's just going to be both of them soon anyway. So it's funny how that works out. But yeah, like I could have just hit up any one of my friends and been like, hey, you're going to be the new co-host of Horror Movie Night. But I think you have to find that relationship that gels. Even if you listen to early One Hit Thunder, I wasn't on the mic. That was something that Chris asked of me
Okay.
to get on the episodes more because I was really getting self-conscious about the fact that I was on all of these podcasts. So for a really long time, I was like, no, I'm just the producer on this one. I'm just going to sit behind the scenes. But especially like in this little studio that I built for myself, like everybody's here face to face and like I'm just kind of sitting off in the corner and so frequently they would be like, well, producer Matt, let us know what you think about that. And then I'd have to like awkwardly walk over and get someone's microphone and answer a question and then walk back to my chair in the corner. So that I was like, all right, let me just set up a mic for myself. And then that doesn't help the situation because now you have a mic in front of you, so people are more inclined to throw questions your way. So it's kind of one of those things where like I appreciate that I'm on all of these things, um, but I'm also like, oh God, I hate that like 5 days a week people can hear my voice on their podcast like that kind of is intimidating to me. I was texting a friend, a recent friend, someone I just befriended over Thanksgiving weekend. Actually, they're a listener of Christmas 365, and we kind of became fast friends. And she was like, "How does it make you feel to know that people think of you when they think of Christmas time?" And I was like, honestly, there's like 5 different buckets. Like there's people
Mhm.
who think of me about when it's Christmas. There's people who think about me when they're watching a bad horror movie. There's another group of people who think about me whenever they think about one hit wonders. And then there's another bucket of people that like anything Muppets they have to send me. So I'm sure you're in the same bucket as me in this sense, Ryan, when like when something like the Muppet Haunted Mansion gets
Oh, yeah.
announced and it's
Yeah.
like you get like 27 different text messages from like different people and in your head you're like really appreciative that they think of you and send it to you, but then it's also like what do you think that I don't fucking know that this is happening? Like this is like you think I have it don't have alerts set up for just such an occasion. Like
Honestly, sometimes I love being the messenger, and it's not even in a podcast form, it's just in social media, like, sometimes just because it's kinda my job in other senses to kind of know about things, that
yeah,
it's like, sometimes, like, when you share something and you see someone, like, says, "Oh, fuck yeah," and, you kinda know the power of hope that content you love is coming out in the future has on people. Like, sometimes I like hearing about movies more than I like how they turned out, just
yeah,
when they're announced. Like the
yeah,
prospect of a Spider-Man movie coming out in the early 2000s, I can't describe to you what that meant to all of us who just were holding on to any superhero movie that came out, no matter how good or bad they were. When X-Men and Spider-Man hit, it was fucking life-changing. I look back on the Tobey Maguire ones, and they're not ones I rewatch all over and over and over
no,
again.
although Spider-Man 2 is really fucking good.
Fucking
Like
good. Spider-Man
it's
to that train fight is why superhero battles are good to begin with.
yeah,
Because it's not just how crazy the cameras got, it's also the reason behind it. It wasn't like, "Hey,
yeah,
fighting's cool." It was more like, "No, he has fucking Mary Jane. What the fuck do I do? Gotta
yeah.
get this guy." And all the people in the train that are potentially gonna die if he fucks up. And there
Who
was
are
a bunch
keeping
of
his identity secret. Like, that's like there's
I know.
it's so good, and I think I've heard Jonathan say this a couple times on Geekscape, but he always talks about the idea of, like, he has to like stop himself when he's just like, oh my God, there's too much Marvel content going on. And then remind himself, like, hey, when you were 13, the idea that they would ever make a movie about the Eternals, like, was fucking insane. Like, the idea
Yeah.
that someone would ever get that deep into Marvel lore to be like, yeah, we can make a movie on this. Like, and there is something to be said about that. Like, this is the stuff that like we grew up on. This is stuff that
Yeah.
we like to a certain extent. I would never say that I was bullied. I didn't deal with a lot of bullying in school, but
Mm.
there was definitely the stuff that made you ostracized. Like, like you weren't the cool kids weren't sitting around reading Spider-Man comics. Like that wasn't what they were doing. So like the idea that all these things that I dedicated so much time and energy to is like a real thing that's popular and that people care about. That's so cool. Like that's like the coolest stuff in the world. Like I love it. I love that like there was a point where I definitely, as we all were in high school, like there was a point when all these punk bands were starting to blow up, and you get like, oh no, this sucks. But like as an adult,
Yeah.
I look back and it's like, it's fucking awesome that I can go to a high school reunion and like Real Big Fish is going to be played at that high school reunion. And it's like, sure, to like 95% of the people at that reunion, they're just going to be like, oh yeah, this cover of Take on Me. But there's going to be like that 5% like me who got really into Real Big Fish and like saw them live multiple times and just digested every album that they put out and became obsessed with like these deep cuts and like that's cool that you have some type of shared anything with that. You know what I mean? Like I don't
Yeah.
know. It's weird. And doing stuff like what we're doing, like with Horror Movie Night and One Hit Thunder and pretty much everything with the Geekscape Network and like the stuff that you've been doing with the Ryan Stick show, like, dude, if I could sit down and tell 16-year-old me that I would in my 30s have the cell phone numbers to like half the members of Five Iron Frenzy and be producing a podcast for the bassist of Punchline and that like I would become really good friends with the dudes in like Bowling for Soup and Less Than Jake. That would have blew his fucking mind. And like now I'm at like 36 and I'm so used to that life now that's just like, oh yeah, no, that's just so and so texting me. But like to literally anybody else, that's like the most unbelievable thing on the planet that's happening.
I feel that way. I have this project called You, Me, and YTV, and it's about Canadian 90s content because there was this channel for kids called YTV back in the day. Well, it still exists now, but it was such a large part of life when cable TV was the only, or just regular TV, when you could get the channel, was just so part of life. And after school programming was so part of life that I ended up starting this show, and it was inspired by Fat Man on Batman because Fat Man on Batman was so specific and so niche. I'm like, that'd be really cool to have a show that's just about that. And everyone in Canada who always wanted to know more about this almost forgotten golden age of Canadian television, and then interviewing the guests of there, but then becoming kind of friends with the guests and eventually going to Fan Expo in Toronto and hosting this show called Student Bodies, like their reunion. And
Yeah.
it's really nice to know that the work you put in actually makes an impact on the people that made an impact on you.
Yeah.
And
No,
yeah, mm,
100%. Like the picture that you use of me for the flyer of this, like that's from a documentary called Wolfman's Got Nards, which is about
sick.
which is about the movie Monster Squad, and that
Yeah,
all stemmed from Horror Movie Night for our 100th episode did Monster Squad. And Scott did an acoustic cover of Rock Until You Drop for that episode. And I
I'm
just
so
happened to
fucking downloading that
dude,
right when
I
we stop.
yeah, dude, I just happened to be at a convention and
Yeah.
Andre Gower and Ryan from the movie were at this convention. And I was like, "Hey, I had my Zoom with me." I said, "Can I do a quick interview with you? Because we just put out our 100th episode of our podcast, and it's about Monster Squad." So I did the interview, and I was shooting the shit with them, and I was like, "Hey, are you going to San Diego Comic Con?" And they were like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Are you signing anywhere?" And they said, "No." And I said, "Do you want to sign at the Geekscape table?" And got their contact information, and basically, shot them an email a couple days later and said, "Hey, we'd love to have you at the table if you're going to be there," and lined everything up. So it was maybe 3 or 4 months after I had done the interview with them at the convention. They show up at San Diego Comic Con, and he recognizes me, obviously, because we've been in contact to set up
Yeah.
the signing. And he was like, "Hey man, I've been meaning to ask you who did that acoustic cover on that Monster Squad episode." And I was like, "Oh my god, he listened to our episode." And he's like, "I'm doing this documentary called Wolfman's Got Nards. I'd love to try to get that song, that cover, into the movie." And he's like, "Also, we're going to be in your neck of the woods filming. Do you want to be in the doc?" And I was like, "Yeah." So like, I, took a day off from work, drove like 4 hours to Virginia to go to an Alamo Draft House where they were doing a special screening of Monster Squad. I got in for free, got to hang out with the whole cast of the movie while they did this like interview with me. And it was like the wildest day, but like every time that Andre's in town for any convention, he shoots me a text to see like if I'm going to be there and if I want to get dinner. Like it's
Oh,
so
man, that's
wild that
lovely.
it's like stuff like that where it's like, dude, that movie when I was 5, I wanted to be part of the Monster Squad so bad. And like now I kind of am. Like it's like the weirdest, it's the wildest twists and turns. Like you never expect that. And I don't want to sit here and I do feel a lot of people reach out to me, and God, there's no way to say this. It doesn't sound like a douchey humble brag, but I'm already halfway there, so I might as well continue. People reach out to me all the time and say like how inspirational they find me just because like I'm just doing it, like I'm just going
Yeah.
for it, and I'm trying to make it happen. And I'm not saying that like every single person that follows my footsteps and like quits their job and pursues their career full time that they're going to befriend all the people that they wanted to befriend when they were 16, but it's certainly more likely to happen than if you just stay in your house doing nothing and hoping it happens. like
Yeah.
you got to put yourself out there and take that risk. And it's the Michael Scott, Wayne Gretzky quote of like, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Um, there's truth to that. You know what I mean? There's truth to that. You gotta take that risk. I I just it's wild, and I do have to remind myself that because there are times where, like I said, you're looking at your bank account and you're like, I don't know if this is working, but it's also like, hey, dude, you only quit your job 4 months ago. Like, like it's not gonna suddenly you knew that you were gonna quit your job and it was gonna be rough for a year. Like, stop
Mhm.
like getting in your head because it's been 4 months and you're not like living the high life eating lobster tail dinners. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna be a bit.
I like it when life changes.
Yeah.
Like, just as a I like it kind of like I have my regular I work for some, Comic Cons in Canada, and there's some regular work that comes there, but I really like it when 1 month there's gonna be a music video, and 1 month there's gonna be this other project, and I like the fact that every month is a little different because I've done the thing where you do the same thing every day, and eventually you can almost feel your week's going to suck as it begins because you're so familiar with you have muscle memory of what the week will be like. And when you dread your week on Monday, then you got to really fucking change it up. And for a while there, I was still going home, making YouTube shit, and still becoming a better editor, despite the fact I was exhausted. And I think that's the real learning curve that people have to understand. You don't quit cold turkey and then learn a craft. You kind of like do both until you feel like you're strong enough to, do it on your own, such as you are right
Yeah.
now. I
Take
mean,
the
you've been
risk. It was
podcasting for years. Yeah.
15 years before I was ready to be like, all right, let's do this.
There you
Like
go.
it was a long time. Um,
Mm.
and you know what? There was something that my aunt told. My aunt has her entire life has been a writer. So like, no one really know her name, but she found a niche in doing ghostwriting for people, and that's been her full-time career for the last 40 years, and that's amazing. And she gave me a piece of advice that really sat with me and really has sat in my brain rent free for almost 5 years now. Was I told her that I had a fear of failure,
Mm.
and she told me that doesn't exist. She goes, fear of failure doesn't exist. Like nothing happens to you when you fail. The status quo remains the same. You don't have to deal with any major changes in your life. Most people who have a fear of failure actually have a fear of success because when you're successful, then everything in your life has to change. And people are by nature terrified of change. And
That's true.
I was like, holy shit. Like it was like the most like earth-shattering like explosion in my brain of like I never would have thought of it like that. But
Mhm.
I've lived the rest of my life thinking about that. Like every time that I feel that
Yeah.
uncertainty, I remind myself that maybe that uncertainty is because I know that I'm closer to what I've said I've wanted my entire life than I've ever been before. You know what I mean? Like this is I described it one time as like um Looney Tunes cartoons, right? Like you're
Mm,
watching a Looney Tunes cartoon and there's like a mad scientist character and he's got that vial of something and it's like shaking in his hand and then he puts like one drop of something and it explodes everywhere. Like I feel this excitement because I feel like my life is in that shaking vial stage. And it's just
yeah.
waiting for like that one extra drop. Like there's just I don't know where it is or what it is, but it's just like one thing needs to happen and then like there's the explosion and it's a whole new ball game for me suddenly. And it's been
Chris
such an exciting 4 months to live. Like,
Chris Jericho said something really similar to that. He said, and I love his podcast. I love his books. In fact, it's funny.
yeah,
Like I like wrestling and all. I grew up with it, but what I loved about him was he was this jack of all trades, and he made it all work. And
yeah,
he's like, yeah, I'm going to write books. I'm going to be in a band. I'm going
yeah.
to be a wrestler. I'm going to do all of it. I'm going to be a podcaster, and he does it all very well. So he said something really great. Is like success is when opportunity is when preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you have this wheelhouse of skills now where you have this ability to produce all these podcasts. But Matt, the very special thing about you is that you are a creative type, but also at the same time you know how to fill out a form, and you know how to submit stuff, and you know how to learn how to do technology. And usually people just have this smoking gun talent, but they don't know how to harness it or don't know how to water it. So the fact that you and Chris have that company in which people who don't have those skills have to contact you, the fact that you have homegrown skills such as that and can kind of work for yourself in a way, it means that whatever podcast money you do bring in, you're not watering down your profits by having an inability to nurture yourself. So it's
No,
really cool
for
that you're
sure.
that self-contained.
Well, and it's also that there's this I I don't think I've met a single creative person who doesn't struggle with imposter syndrome. You know what I mean? Like it's like
Uh,
every single one of us deals with it. But it's like it's so humbling to hear other people talk about it too, where it's like I've found myself in situations where it's like I've been podcasting more years than 99% of the people who have podcasts right now.
mm,
So the idea that in the back of my head that some person who's never had a podcast before is going to reach out to me and ask for my help, and I'm the back of my mind, I'm like, "Oh no, are they gonna figure out that I don't know what I'm talking about?" Like, it's insane. Like, it's insane that that's like what runs through my head sometimes when it's like every potential client that we've ever gotten to get on a phone call with us has almost immediately want to sign up for us because they're like, you can articulate what your skill sets are very well, and like it's very clear that you know what you're talking about. But like because we live in a society where like skill is only defined by monetary gain so much, you feel
yeah,
like, whoa, well, because I haven't made a ton of money doing this, I must not be as skilled as the next person that is making a
gotcha.
ton of money doing this. It's wild, dude. The way that your brain can just absolutely work against you all day, every day is fucking crazy.
Uh, the my like to quote Lit, my own worst enemy is like literally myself. Like if I have
Yeah.
nothing going on, I could walk down the street and convince myself I fucking suck, and everything I've said in the last like 5 episodes is beyond embarrassing. And it's funny how you can't separate yourself from that, but at the same time it's way better than to not have that voice at all, because then it actually allows us to be able to self-improve ourselves. I tend to edit myself before someone else can. Like I would rather be completely aware of everything that went wrong in a show before somebody can condescendingly point it out to me. And as a result, I think I've improved upon things in life. And had I had an unbreaking confidence where I kind of say to myself, good enough, because I'm great. Good enough. The good enough factor 10, 12, 13 years back when I started editing YouTube videos would have really not benefited if I caught myself off in the legs from the potential that could have been had I not had this antsiness in my head saying it's got to be better, got to be better, got to be better. So as much as I
Yeah.
want to strangle that fucker in my head that like drives me nuts day and night, at the same time I got to kind of thank that personality quirk for kicking me in the ass and allowing me to, even though I'm particularly successful, I don't particularly suck either. So,
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean,
mm.
it's wild. Like I said, your brain just can do so much to just absolutely. I love the Lit reference. Check out the One Hit Thunder episode on Lit, My Own Worst Enemy. Even though in my heart they're not a one hit wonder, the Billboard chart says otherwise. But yeah, like your mind just is always working against you, and it takes a lot to get over that. And I mean, all the meditation, all the therapy in the world still hasn't been able to totally shut that voice off, but it muted it enough that I was willing to take a risk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's, hopefully, fingers crossed. I really do feel like I'm going to look back on this and feel like it all paid off, but I could be wrong. I'm ready to eat those words if that's the case. But I feel I've never felt more confident about the decisions that I've made in my life. And it's like, let's just live this out and we'll see what happens. And, my one friend told me, hey, there's always DoorDash looking for help. And it's not like there's not going to be a job for you to go back to if this doesn't work. Like, it's not like you have officially made yourself unhireable for the rest of your life. If nothing else, you're setting yourself up to show how good your skill sets are to do something like this at a corporate job one day or something, which I mean, kill me. But like, I'd much rather just do it solo, the best of my abilities. But I don't know.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm not sure about you guys in Canada, but here in the States, it gets real complicated trying to do the taxes when you're self-employed. So
Yeah. It's interesting, man. Like full disclosure, I got really sick when I was like 19. And
okay.
took months to recover, whatever. Big C. It's all better now. It's been 17 years. But I remember like that's the moment where I said to myself, "Oh shit, maybe I'm not going to be a rock star, Maybe my band isn't very good. Maybe this bubble I've lived in since I was 13 that says this is all you're going to do. You're going to be a musician. It's what you're going to do. You love being on stage. That's what life's all about." And I remember just being 19, all of a sudden turning into a 45-year-old immediately and being
Yeah.
surrounded by people who are still in that, fuck yeah, life, we're fucking invincible. We're never going to die. I'm a golden god. Like
Yeah.
that shit. And I remember like thinking to myself, I got to learn how to do something else. And my dad had just inherited an editing program from one of his students on a computer. And my dad kind of told me how to do a cut. And that was it. That was the only formal training. And the rest of it was just day and night obsession. Because the second I realized that I don't have to use a VCR to do an edit anymore, that was fucking the most exhilarating experience. Dorothy opening up the door to Oz. The world is in color. Nothing has
Yeah.
ever felt cooler since. And for 10 years, just seven, well, it's been 17, but for a good 10 years, it was just practicing,
Yeah.
making shows with the friends, just doing it for the fuck of it, because why the fuck not? And it feels so good to just put something out there that is not just in your imagination. And as much as I shit on myself for shitty views and all that kind of stuff, really to do it all again and to not do it would be more heartbreaking than any low view count.
No,
And
100%.
and eventually I did find myself in a job where all these random fucking things I know how to do actually were required. And do I do long hours of work each week? Yes, but at the same time, I've worked construction before, and every day I went to that job, I felt like a horse in a lion costume. And no
Yeah.
matter how much time I spent with the lions, acting like a lion, doing lion things, I am still a horse in a lion costume. So it was really fucking cool to find a job where you could be a horse and that's fine. And then all
Yeah.
of a sudden you're working longer. It's Monday to Friday. Some weeks are 50 hours. You're like, whatever.
Yeah.
Because
My
you're being you. And I'm sure you feel that way too these days.
Yeah, my dad told me
Mm,
this when I told him I was quitting my job to do the full-time self-employed thing. He said self-employment will either be the best paying hard job of your life or the lowest paying easy job of your life. Uh, and there's
I
a
like
lot of
that.
truth in that.
Yeah.
It's like there's a lot of truth in that, and it's funny because it slowed down a little bit. I've gotten a better handle of it because I was absolutely burning myself out. But
Mm.
like, I quit my job at the end of July, hit the ground running August 1st, and it was literally like I would wake up at 7 in the morning. I would go for an hour walk. I would come home, hop in the shower, and then from 9 a.m. until 11 p.m., I would be upstairs editing or recording or doing something, like only stopping to make lunch and dinner. And then I would go to bed and do it all over again 7 days a week. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, it was, I'm trying to find a slightly better balance because it was like that was great, but I also wasn't like living any life at that point. Like I was like, I don't
Okay.
have time to spend time with people that I care about because I'm literally cutting them off to like work around the clock. So,
Mm.
there was a little bit of like a financial dip when I decided to slow down. Like there is a truth to it where I was making great money, but I wasn't doing anything
Yeah.
anymore. So there is that weird balance, and it's that weird game that you play where it's like maybe this will be the thing that changes. Maybe this will be the thing that becomes profitable. Like we said, you're hedging your bets. You're throwing that quantity out there, hoping that like enough people discover One Hit Thunder and like it that those numbers bounce up, and then maybe an advertiser is interested in it and the show continues to grow and people get hungry to see you live, and then you can go on tour and you can make shirts and you can sell merch and you can this and this and this and this, and then it keeps growing. But like what I had realized was I had hit a point where I was dedicating 40 hours of my week to a job that I hated to
Yeah.
spend 20 hours of my week doing the thing that I was passionate about.
Mhm.
And I thought, man, but what if I could dedicate 60 hours of the week to the thing I was passionate about? Could that in turn m- re- generate enough revenue to make it so that my passion project could eventually downgrade to being 30 or 40 hours of my week? So that's the experiment that we're in right now. We'll see what happens. But like
Mm.
that's kind of the weird game that I had to kind of hit a breaking point at. And it just felt like the right time because I was at a job that I absolutely loved. And then it got bought out by another company and it very quickly stopped looking like the job that I loved for so many years. So
Gotcha.
it was one of those things where you're like, hey, the writing's on the walls that they're inevitably going to shut this place down and fire all of us in the next year or two anyway.
Mm.
So why not take the leap? Why not just before they can get rid of me, I'll remove myself from the equation and I'll really just put the work in and hope that this has all been worth it for the last 15 years, and it all led to being on the Ryan Stick show. So I can officially say that I've hit my plateau and it's time to find another job now. But no, but it was, I mean, it's a blast. And getting to meet, so like, I would have never met someone like you who, like,
Mm.
constantly your posts, I'm like, dude, this is fucking me. This is just Canadian Matt.
You can call me Canadian Matt if you want to.
Yeah, I think that's going
Yeah.
to be it now. Did you change the name of the show? The
I
Canadian
wear
Matt Kelly
glasses
show.
too. I'm in contact lenses, man.
I
I
can't
let my
put stuff
hair
in
grow
my
out.
eyes. It freaks me out.
I
But
used to get my drummer to do it for me when I first got contact lenses because I would go on stage, take I'm a bassist, so I could, find my notes because arguably the neck of a bass is much bigger than a guitar. But I used to go on stage and just jump around and not be able to see shit. So, I went on and, optionally Ray Charles myself every fucking night. And eventually I'm just like, I'm going to fall off the fucking stage at one point. I need contact lenses, but I was too scared of it. So my drummer's in a dive bathroom, fucking like go over there, and I'm like this, and he's putting his finger in my eye, and someone walks upstairs and seeing, and it's very reminiscent of Pepper walking into Tony Stark for the first
yeah,
time, taking his stuff off, and is like, come on, that's not the worst thing you've ever seen. I like
yeah.
literally looked at them. I'm like, there was a fucking orgy here last week. Okay, this is fucking nothing. We're just two dudes putting their fingers in each other's eyes. Okay, nothing weird here.
That's what happens when you're on the road. Um,
Yeah.
but so I want to make sure. I feel like we've
Mm.
covered most of the big topics, but I feel
Yeah.
like we just scratched the surface on Muppets. Let's get some geeky Muppetness in here before we wrap up the show, right? Like
Oh yeah.
that's what we're all here for.
Well, that's what I'm here for in life. Oh, and speaking of everybody, well, I can say this for the Canadian Disney Plus. I'm not sure if it's coming out on the American one. You can tell me. But Kirk R. Thatcher, who directed Muppet Haunted Mansion, he has directed multiple Muppet films, including A Very Merry Muppet Christmas. And what I'm bringing up right now is Muppets Letters to Santa. And that just dropped on Disney Plus in Canada
Yep.
for the very first time in a history of fucking ever, even though
Yep.
the app's only about a year old. And it was fucking delightful to see a film I have not seen since 2007. Again, in a kind of like a you better impress me, like, as I first saw it, because I'll tell you, Muppet Christmas Carol and Muppet Family Christmas are so near and dear to me
Well, I
that
was
I'm
gonna say
like,
they'll impress me when Muppet Family Christmas drops on Disney Plus. They get that shit on
ugh,
Disney Plus, I'll lose my mind because I've got so many
the whole
bootleg
one.
DVDs of that thing. Exactly.
Yeah,
The only way I can watch the whole one is someone's VHS rip on YouTube. Like someone uploaded
yeah,
like the 50-minute version on YouTube. But
I
what a
know,
perfect special. Like I
perfect.
think arguably my favorite Jim Henson anything is Muppet Family Christmas. It's so endearing. It's so beautiful. I was actually explaining it to someone the other day. So I was saying it's almost haunting. It's almost
Mm,
haunting that so close to when Jim Henson would unfortunately get sick and die, he organizes this beautiful thing that's all of his IP coming together in one shared episode of something. And just beyond that, then it ends with him washing the dishes and talking about how
mm.
much seeing the Muppets happy makes him happy. It's just beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. I watch it like 5 or 6 times every December. Like it's probably once
Um,
a week. I'm like, I gotta watch this.
Fuck yeah, dude. It's crazy in a sense that how watchable it is. But years before the MCU and all this shared IP and shared universe, all these fuckers in Hollywood, let's have a shared universe. It's just like, man, Henson made the Henson universe way
Yeah, he did.
before it was cool. And it's so fucking touching. And it's amazing. Like, it not only does Sesame Street and Fraggle Rock meet the Muppets, but they have genuine connections and the
Yep.
friendships you see bond. Like, being a 5-year-old kid, seeing them together, I almost took advantage of the fact that I wasn't used to it because I was so young when I saw it. But to someone who grew up with Sesame Street and was more familiar with the Muppets and Sesame Street during the 70s, that must have blew their fucking mind, you know?
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right.
Hmm.
Like seeing like Cookie Monster and Animal hit it off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like stuff like that. I mean, my favorite scene in that whole special is has got to be when Doc meets Bert and Ernie and they have the like Doc, that starts with a D. And he's like, yes. He's like, yes, that starts with a Y. He's
True.
like,
And true starts
he's
and
like,
true starts with a letter T.
he's like, what are you pull my leg? And it's like, this is small talk where we come from. Like,
Well, I
so
gotta go
good.
upstairs and build some bunk beds.
Best
Ah, bunk beds, B words. Ah.
God, you were
Yeah.
very good on those Muppet voices.
Thank you.
Actually, here's one of my most prized possessions directly behind me. So I did a friend's wedding, and as a thank you for it, they gave me that's a copy of the original patent that Jim Henson submitted for a Muppet.
Oh wow,
Framed
shit.
behind me. Like, look at
Holy shit. Yeah, I'm seeing that.
that. Yeah, I
Wow.
that was their hey, thanks for marrying us gift to me. So I mean, it's framed. I make sure that it's like somewhere that people can see it whenever I'm streaming from the couch. So absolutely love that. One of the best gifts anyone's ever given me. All of my best gifts are Muppet gifts.
I have somewhere. It's in the other room.
Mug that
And I
I
and I
already
should have brought.
drank out of it, so now I have this Kermit one. But
Oh, I have the Kermit one. Wait, is it this one? Which one do you have?
no, mine's the host with the most Kermit the Frog green one.
I know, but they're
I think
very similar though. When you look at them, they're
yeah.
like the art style. And it's very
So
I can't tell if it's classic because it really screams 70s white,
it
where it's
looks
like that
super
off-white. Yeah,
70s, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I have way too many coffee mugs because I don't really drink. So like tea is like my
Mm,
version of alcohol. Like whereas someone might have like a glass of wine or a beer every night,
mm,
I have a cup of tea every night.
yeah.
It's a very British thing. So people buy me coffee mugs all the time, and I have so many Muppets ones because it's like, oh, Matt likes coffee mugs and Muppets, so like let's find a Muppets mug. But my sister got it is my favorite mug right now. It's this beautiful, big, tall, white one that's just the whole cup is just a collage of like 200 Muppets all
Ah,
over it. It's
wow.
fucking gorgeous. I'll take a picture and send it to you after we record. It's one of the most gorgeous gifts I've ever gotten. So yeah, no, I mean Muppets for life, man. Jim Henson. I was hanging out with someone the other day and they asked me who like my biggest influences in life were, and I was like, growing up, my heroes were my grandfather, Mr. Rogers, and Jim Henson. She's like, oh, so like the three most wholesome people you could possibly think of. It's like, say like it's a bad thing. I think it's very good if someone really wants to be like three extremely kind, generous, wholesome human beings. But just the best. I'm sure you go through this too, where you have like
Mm,
we're doing these interview shows and we have like those dream guests that we would love to eventually work our way to. Like for me, it's like if I can find a way to sit down and talk to like Weird Al Yankovic or John Waters, like I fucking want it to happen. We mentioned Kevin Smith, obviously.
yeah,
But then there's those ones where you're like, dude, I'm never gonna get the opportunity to talk to Jim Henson, and it kills me inside because it'd be
yeah.
like a 10-hour podcast. I would have so many questions about so much stuff, and I would want to talk about Sam and Friends, and I would want to talk about his short film Timepiece, and like I
Mm.
would I would love to talk about like the dialogue in the Muppet movie. Like if Jim Henson knew how many times I've had to pick myself up using quotes from the Muppet movie of like, you know, for me, it's just a bunch of friends singing and dancing and laughing. And if that's the kind of dream you can share with everybody, like, like that's like the stuff where you're like, oh my God, fucking yes, Kermit, you get it. Like, oh God. Or just crying, listening to like, I'm going to go back there someday. And
Oh,
like,
yeah.
is there like a more perfect lyric than there's not a word yet for old friends who just met? Like, God, I've been in that situation a million times. Like,
Y You know what's crazy about, Paul Williams, the composer of the Muppet movie and also the Muppet Christmas Carol, like, 2 fucking movies where those soundtracks just, as the kids say, fucking slap, like, it's insane how much I can sing those songs and
yep.
just relive the magic in them, is that Paul Williams, he was live at the Fantasia Film Festival in Montreal, and he was there for a screening of Phantom of the Paradise and
Hell
winning
yeah, he was.
and getting a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he signed my Muppet movie vinyl that I had just gotten from some friends, and the
Yeah.
vinyl fell off the wall and the case cracked, and I was like, "Wow, that's kind of interesting," because usually I'd be like, "Fuck, the case cracked," but I'm like, "But it's out of it. I should
Yeah.
bring this vinyl with me."
Yeah.
So hearing Paul Williams, of course, someone brings up the Muppets, and we're t- we're living in a world where entertainment is helicoptered and there's producers and executive producers, and Kirk R. Thatcher, who's been on the show, he mentioned how, like, there was a lot of, there was someone up above at Disney who was really like, why is this taking longer, blah blah blah. But Jim Henson was so fucking chill that with Paul Williams, he literally said, I want you to, I'm not going to do a Jim Henson impression because I can't do him without going full Kermit,
Yeah.
but he says, "Yeah, this is what's going to happen in the movie," and yeah. And Paul was like, "Okay, but what do I do?" He's like, "Well, write songs." So he wrote the songs, and then they're like, "Oh, that's great," and that's it. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? There wasn't any micromanagement of, "Oh no, Kermit's not doesn't do that till this part. Can you rewrite this lyric to
Yeah.
accommodate this other part and put a fucking weird scene in Age of Ultron that justifies Thor Ragnarok?" Like
Yeah,
it.
it's so weird. And it's God, and Paul Williams has such a distinct style. That's like the
Yeah.
thing that I love about it is like
Mm,
I didn't even have to read that he was the guy who did the music for Emmett Otter. I just could tell from listening to the melody lines of the songs in Emmett Otter. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like it's such he has that very like I didn't really know who Paul Williams was until the Muppet Show DVDs started coming out. And
Cool. Okay.
and when I watched the first season of the Muppet Show, I hope you guys got this DVD up there. If you didn't, I would be so sad
Oh
for you.
yeah. No,
But
I got season 1 in the room. Yeah.
yeah, so season 1 has that amazing like pop-up video feature where you can watch every episode and it's just like every 2 minutes like a different fact pops up on the screen. So I would watch those DVDs repeatedly to make sure that I would catch every little fact because I just wanted to know everything that I could possibly know about the Muppet Show. And in doing that, I was like, I love this dude's music. Like the just another old fashioned love song and a sad song. Like he just had this beautiful wordplay. And I was like, this guy's great. And then I come to find out, like, oh, he wrote the songs for Emmett Otter. Oh, he wrote the Muppet movie songs. Oh, he wrote Muppets Christmas Carol. And then someone suggested me Phantom of the Paradise in college, and I watched that and I'm like, oh my God, this is that guy too. Like, it's just like, dude cannot miss. Like, and I just started picking up whatever albums of his I could pick up, and like, and he seems like such a I mean, he seems like he can be a bit of a crotchety old man at times, but he seems like in his heart, he's full of nothing but like love and admiration for his time that he did specifically with the Muppets. Like, hearing
Yeah.
him talk about the Muppets, there was did you watch the show on Disney Plus, Prop Culture?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
When they
100%.
hand that tiny banjo prop to Paul Williams, like, seeing how much that little prop means to him still, like, heartbreaking. I literally started crying watching that episode because, like, if there was a prop that I could hold in my hands, I think that's the one I want. Like, I want to hold that banjo, the Jim Henson and the Muppets and that specific banjo connects so deeply with
Mm.
my relationship with my grandfather, and
Oh.
my love of the Muppets grew after my grandfather died. So my grandfather played banjo in a bunch of Dixieland bands when I was growing up,
Oh,
and
cool.
I had another uncle who was a really great impressionist, and he would do Kermit the Frog, and he would have a puppet. So when we were kids, my grandfather would play the banjo, and my uncle would sing Rainbow Connection to us with the puppet.
Oh,
But
that must have been fucking crazy, man. Whenever anyone played any song when I was a kid, I thought they were like they I thought they were channeling the gods. I'm like, how the fuck
yeah,
are you that is coming out of you?
yeah,
Yeah.
it was wild to watch that happen.
Mm.
And then my grandfather got the big C, and it was like 2 months, and he was out. Like, it was
Okay.
very quick. But I remember this was like 10th grade. I'd kind of fallen out with Muppet stuff. Like, I was kind of that too cool for school. And I just remember I came home from school to get ready for the funeral, and I turned on the TV, and the Muppet movie was starting, and I heard that banjo riff, and I was just like, not only was it one of those moments, every once in a while you feel like those moments where it's like, whether you're a spiritual person or not, you feel like the person that you're missing is like right there with you for a second. So I felt
Yeah.
that to my core, but it also was just like, oh, why have you been gone from me so long, Muppets? Like, you are such like a beautiful warm blanket. And it was from that point on, I was like Mr. Muppet. Like, I would talk about it nonstop. I would make mix CDs of just Muppet songs and covers of Muppet songs from old Muppet Show episodes and just all types of wild shit. So, yeah, that to be even near that banjo prop would have been just, I don't think I would emotionally be able to do it. I think I'd just start breaking down because it would just connect so many pieces. So, listeners of the Ryan Stick Show, if you have any ability for me to be able to get near that prop,
It's you're mentioning prop culture. Another amazing episode of that is Nightmare Before Christmas, and I'm
yeah,
bringing that up because that's another movie where the songwriting and all that shit wasn't fucking micromanaged to its like to until it bled, including the writing of the script. There was only like one pass of that script, and it's like this classic movie that's like existed forever. But it's just like creativity now. It's just like there's just too many cooks in a kitchen sometime,
yeah,
man. And because we can communicate so fast and you can't hide on a studio lot essentially without making you can't claim your phone was off for 6 days or you just were so far out you couldn't get a phone call. It seems
yeah,
like the people who are in charge of creative stuff are just, they have a magnifying glass and they're just kind of killing all that spontaneous fun that we loved
yeah.
about trauma and punk rock, and in
Well,
this
and
case Muppet
God,
Show. Imagine Jim Henson, you are the fucking creator of the Muppets, and you have so much self-confidence that you're going to go to Paul Williams and say, well, I believe you're a good songwriter, do it.
yeah, just do it. Just write the
And that's
song.
enough.
Well,
Yeah.
and then you also have like, I'm going to throw a title out there that I feel very strongly you probably know this movie, but a lot of people
Mm,
listening won't. Is you have a
okay.
film like Freaked? Have you ever seen Freaked with
I have
Alex
not seen
Winter?
Freaked. I gotta check that
Oh,
out with
just threw
Alex
in.
Winter.
Yeah.
Oh fuck, I love Alex Winter. Sign me up, man. I'll watch that tonight.
So Alex Winter made
Yeah.
this movie so he had a short-lived show on MTV called The Idiot Box. That was
Okay.
him and his two friends from college, Tom Stern and
Mm.
Tim Burns. and Idiot Box was like blowing up. Like Kurt Cobain was like on interviews was saying it was the best show on television, and it was like really warped, demented sketch comedy that they would play in between the music videos. So the show was so popular in just 6 episodes. They only produced 6 episodes of this show that 20th Century Fox threw them a massive budget to make a horror movie. So they make this movie called Freaked, and it's Alex Winter. He's this like big Hollywood slime ball, and he gets hired to go to South America to get this like poison to bring to the States as like the spokesperson. And he ends up finding a freak show run by Randy Quaid, and Randy Quaid mutates him into a freak for the freak show. And the freak show is like Mr. T playing the bearded lady, Keanu Reeves playing Ortiz the dog boy, Bobcat Goldthwait's the voice of Sockhead, which is literally a person with a sock puppet for a head. Like, it's these amazing special effects. But basically, the guy at 20th Century Fox who hired them and gave them all this money got fired in the middle of production. And the new president of the company was like, "What the fuck is this?" And just like pulled their budget mid movie. So they just had to scrape it together with what they
Oh
had left.
shit.
It is one of the most insane. It's like a Three Stooges horror movie. Like, that's the way that they describe it. It was originally written to be a movie starring the Butthole Surfers. Like, it was going to be like the Butthole Surfers as all of these freaks. Budget got pulled, so the Butthole Surfers did the whole soundtrack to the movie instead. So it's just fucking chaos. But like, as we're talking about, like, yeah, when you could just sneak under the radar for just so long that you could do like the wildest, craziest shit that no studio in like 2021 would ever throw money to.
Yeah.
Um, Freaked is like one of those shining examples for me. And like, I don't know, I love, I love that kitschy type of shit. Like, I was getting made fun of the other day by a friend of mine because I was so excited that Scream Factory announced that they were putting out Alligator 1 and 2 on Blu-ray.
I
And I was,
saw you posted that. That's
dude, I was
cool.
so
Yeah.
fucking excited. Like, I'm not sure if you've ever seen Alligator, but like, it is as good as Jaws in my mind. Like, I was like, it is like right below Jaws in importance for me as far as like aquatic horror films go.
Yeah.
It is just so funny. It's so smart. It's so gory. It's so goofy. And like the fact that they're putting out this 3-disc 4K HD Blu-ray disc is like insane. And then that they're going to finally put the sequel, which is like total trash, on Blu-ray as well. Like, I can't fucking wait to replace both of my copies of Alligator, because I have like the last Anchor Bay DVD release from like 15 years ago and a
Okay.
bootleg of part 2, and like to be able to replace those with like actual nice Blu-rays that have like all these dope special features. Like, I'm so excited. I love that we live in this world where the people like us who grew up catching those movies on like late night television are now like the people in charge at these companies that can just be like, let's finance a bunch of money to get both of the Alligator movies out on Blu-ray. Like, I love that. I love that this is the world we live in now.
I love it too. It's validating. It's almost
Yeah.
validating because, like, when you're, especially when you like weird shit that not everyone else likes, it's not because I particularly wanted to be cool. It's just that how can you not love the Monster Squad?
Yeah.
And then when you put it out in the world, you're like, wait a second. Not everyone loves Howard the Duck. Not everyone
Yeah.
loves the Monster Squad. Why is no one as excited as me that this is finally coming out on DVD? And it's really cool. The good thing about the internet, the shitty thing about the internet is everyone has an opinion and it's cool to hate, and it's cool to hate on everything, but not everybody is articulate and funny about it, which is lovely to hear. When you hear someone tear someone apart and they're good at what they do, you don't care if it's a roast on something you love. But when someone doesn't
Yeah.
have the intelligence to actually shit on it in a way that's endearing, then it's like the worst thing in the world. But it actually, sorry, off topic. What's really fucking funny to me, and if you didn't like the new episodes, it's all good. But I really, really like Masters of the Universe Revelations because for the first time in my life, I'm an X-Men the animated series and Batman the animated series guy, where characters' lives fucking matter
Yeah.
and stuff, and there's consequences and story arcs and death and all that shit. So I'm a little too young to get the He-Man bug from the 80s, with the exception of I knew my sister's friends liked it.
Yeah, I have a
And
bunch of toys from that time, but I don't remember watching the show.
there you go.
Like,
So when you watch the show, you watch it in kind of like it's pretty much the ambiguously gay duo from Saturday Night Live.
yeah,
It's you watch it in a nostalgic, but at the same time, you can't help but notice how comedically funny it is. So I'm watching Revelations. I'm like, holy shit, Cringer, my whole fucking life. That fucking like scaredy cat pissed me off, and all these other side characters. I'm like, man, why are you even there? And by part one's end, I'm like, fuck yeah, man, Cringer is awesome. And Orko, fuck yeah, Orko made me cry. Wow. And then I see the internet being like, you fucking ruined T-Man. I'm like, did they though? like,
well,
like,
and I agree with you. Yeah, there's
yeah.
a combination of like the opinionated assholes, but like the thing that I always said was like I think the internet gave us this beautiful thing, which was
Mm,
that we all had this shared unique experiences that we didn't realize we were having
yeah.
when we were kids, and we didn't have that mass communication. Where like for me, I caught caught the movie Freaked on like a free weekend of Showtime at my house, and
Nice.
like no one knew what it was, and I taped it and I would show it to people, but like I was the person sharing that movie to people, and then to find out like this person in New York and this person in Australia and this person in Los Angeles and this person in Nevada, like all had the same experience where we caught this movie late at night, taped it, and then had to show it to all of our friends because no one knew what the fuck we were talking about. And you have this weird, like, shared experience with a bunch of strangers that for years you thought was exclusively unique to yourself. And like that is the beauty of the internet, is those moments where you meet someone that under any you and I under any other circumstances, there's no way you and I would ever cross paths. Then we
Nope.
like just happen to, Chris is like, hey, this guy's talking to a dude who does Muppet stuff. I think you'd enjoy it. And I'm like
Yeah.
fucking in the chat, just like, yo, dude, but
You
when are we gonna get like Muppet Show season 6? Like, I'm like just
You
getting
were asking
super,
all the best questions, man. You're the MVP of that. Thank you so much for participating.
of
But it's
course.
knowing how much you love Muppets now, I'm really fucking glad I booked that because I was hearing things that blew my fucking mind, like how he met Jim Henson and how he had a very similar phone call to how Greg Capullo started working for Todd McFarlane, where
Yeah.
he gets a phone call and a mom picks up the phone and fucks up their name and people don't think it's them. And it's fucking beautiful to hear all these experiences and just how deep it goes. And that's my favorite thing about podcasting, man. It's not even if it's about my show or listening to somebody else's. I love it when someone shows me how deep a well is that I didn't realize how deep it could go, because I
Yeah.
loved it my whole life. And it's really cool to see why did I love it my whole life. And I only knew the thing, like the movie, as far as the curtain would show me. But when someone tells me what happened behind the curtain, all of a sudden, the thing I loved my whole life, knowing how much Monster Squad had going against it, it
Yeah.
makes me love it even more. And
Yeah.
the beautiful thing, everybody out there, I strongly urge you to check out Wolfman's Got Narves by Andre Gower. He kind of made a movie instead of just another making of the movie, which we have seen
Yeah.
before. Why not talk about the fandom? Because the fans and what they've had to do and the creativity they've put into it, they've never had official action figures to rely on. So it wasn't like they're like, oh, here's all this official stuff, but I'm so fucking good, I'll make my own. It's like, no, it was a necessity to get it out of them somehow because no one was going to make it because no one knows who owns the rights.
Yeah.
And that's fucking beautiful. Man, Wolfman has not God Nards made me cry, man. It was a beautiful thing to experience. I
Yeah.
got all
Well,
swept
and
up
my
in
host Kyle,
it. Yeah.
it's, my new co-host Kyle made this amazing documentary called Survival of the Film Freaks, which is about cult film. How does cult film survive in a digital age? And like that was, I barely knew him when he was making that. He had made a college film called Phantasm, which I actually have the poster of hanging up on the other side of this TV. But I was a fan of the documentary that he had made for Phantasm and had reached out to him, and we met up when I was in LA one summer and hung out and became really good friends. And whenever he had a project to promote, I would bring him on horror movie night. And that's how like his friendship with Scott and I developed.
Yeah.
But when he was doing Survival of the Film Freaks, like it was this documentary about how do we preserve these classic films? How like in a digital age, where you can find anything at the click of a button, do we lose the
Mm.
idea of cult films because of that? Do we lose the idea of like that search of finding that movie that you've been hearing about for 10 years and couldn't find a copy of at any video store? Like does that whole culture, is that whole culture going to die now?
Mm.
That was what his documentary was about. And I remember talking to him and he said, like, I just got really sick of people doing film documentaries that were just like, "Hey, remember when" clip shows for 2 hours. And it's like,
Mm.
yeah, like you said, like we've seen the making of documentaries, but like I do think that the stuff like Wolfman's Got Nards or the Troll 2 one, Best Worst Movie, like these movies that really tap into something so much deeper than like how the movie was made, but like what that impact is after the fact. Like once this thing has been out there, it's been declared a failure, and everybody that's tied to it has already decided, well, that sucked, and they stop thinking about it. What happens when like hundreds to thousands to millions of other people find it and do care about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up Troll 2, the best worst movie ever. That's actually sometimes documentaries like that could be even better than the films
Oh,
itself.
for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
I watched Troll 2 in preparation of that documentary, and I was like, "Well, that was painful." And then I watched the documentary, and I'm like, "Well, now I need to rewatch Troll 2." And I think I went back to Troll 2 with a much deeper appreciation for the movie, just because, like, it helps to have people point out that stuff. If I could make a documentary about anything, and I always throw out ideas for stuff, I would love
Yeah.
to make a documentary about that guy right up there, Sleepaway Camp. I wanna know like how the makers of that film feel about the fandom that has grown for that movie and for the sequels that they had nothing to do with. Like I think that the Pamela Springsteen sequels, Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3 are just as fun.
Yeah.
So
I
like,
think I commented on your post where it's just like it's fucked up that 2 movies in a row, part 2 and part 3, they had no confidence, the marketing department had no confidence in her to put her
yeah.
actually on the fucking,
No, it's
movie. In
just a
fact, in
model.
part 3, it's like boob central, and I'm like, "That she looks like the type of girl that Angela would throw into an outhouse full of leeches and beat with a fucking stick."
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a, and she is legitimately like her film career is like what, maybe 4 movies, but she is a very charismatic, likable actress. Like Pamela Springsteen, there's something about her personality and her delivery where it's like there's not a single moment where Angela is scary or intimidating, but you just love her. Like you just can't stop looking at her. And like,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, I mean, I do horror conventions, so I've met Felicia Rose. Like, I
Yeah.
think that you could just stumble into a horror convention and become best friends with Felicia Rose. She's everywhere. But like the Angela of the original Sleepaway Camp movie does not charm me on the same level that Pamela Springsteen charms me in those sequels.
Well, kinda weird. Okay, just on we could talk about anything, and clearly we are, and we're going to right now. Sleepaway Camp, when I first watched that movie, it's interesting how she wouldn't talk in the beginning of the film, but then all of a sudden started to a lot.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny, like, I can't remember the distinct moment where she kind of came out of her shell or whatever, but, I was watching Fear Street, 1978 or 6, I can't remember, and I remember there was this scene where, one of the counselors goes up to the cabins and see that all the kids have been kind of hacked up and can't control himself and barfs, and I'm like, "I'm pretty fucking sure that that's from Sleepaway Camp 1." Am
Yeah.
I right in that?
Yeah. No, that's in the first Sleepaway Camp where she straight up murders like 10-year-olds or younger
Yeah.
in that movie. Like it's the last like 10-15 minutes of that movie is horrifying. Like is I like it's such a cheesy bad movie, but man, like it is a really good impactful final act. Like in a huge way. So dude,
Yeah.
dude,
Yeah.
I so my experience, I've talked about this on Horror Movie Night before, but I
Mm.
always love sharing this story. Was I had heard about Sleepaway Camp for years.
Yeah.
Years I had heard about this movie, and I never found a copy of it. Um, and then my friend from high school had posted a Facebook status that, based on a bunch of people's recommendations, he bought the Sleepaway Camp box set sight on scene, and he
Okay.
fucking hated it, and he just wanted to get rid of it. So I was like, I will take it. Like, so I drove to his house and I grabbed this box set, and it's not the expensive one with the red cross on it, but it's still the very good box set that they put out.
Okay.
And I drive home, and I'm living at my grandmom's house at that point because I was a freshman in college. I'm hanging out in the basement all night, and then I have to go up 2 flights of stairs to get to where my bedroom is. So it's like midnight, and I put on Sleepaway Camp, and I'm like immediately charmed by it. Like I'm just immediately a fan of what I'm seeing. And then that final shot happens with the face, right? And I remember the walk up those 2 flights of stairs was the scariest walk I've ever done through a house because I passed by so many windows and I was so tired that I was seeing that face staring at me through every single window that I walked past on my way to
I
bed.
know.
I was just like, why is that face so burned into your retinas that you can't get rid of it?
And it's not even the fact that she's, like, standing there with a severed head and has a penis or anything.
No, it's
I'm
the
like I'm
jaw.
like, yeah, the jaw and the noises she's making. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Jesus Christ." Like, to this day, even the first Friday the 13th when, Jason comes out of the water and grabs her that I was not expecting. 2 things those movies had in common. When you watch a horror movie and you want to be moved by it, don't watch it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and be like, wasn't that scary? While I'm
Yeah.
checking your phone, you pieces of shit out there. I know you fucking do that. I swear to
That's what
God,
happened with me with that's what happened with me with Blair Witch Project. I was like, I don't understand why people think this movie's scary. Meanwhile, I'm watching it with like 4 friends at 2 in the afternoon in their basement in 2001. Like,
yeah.
obviously, it's not going to be scary. Then I watched it late at night on Halloween by myself in a bedroom, and I'm like, dude, this movie's fucking terrifying.
I saw it in the
Like,
movie theater, and the person we were with, a few friends went, and one of them didn't know it was fake. And
yeah,
seeing her face afterwards, before we had to tell her it was like, it was fake, she actually thought it all fucking happened. And
yeah,
it's like, it's kind of convincing. It's like nobody's like, there's no theater students in that
no,
fucking woods. They're
and I
like,
mean, it's
Josh,
mostly real.
where is Josh? Oh my God, Josh.
Yeah.
It's like no one's big.
But I think the secret is that
Yeah.
it's mostly real to a certain extent. Like, they were in
Mm.
on the fact that they were making a movie, but I think from what I understand, they just kind of dropped these actors in the woods with some cameras and just said, "Hey, enjoy the next 5 days. We're going to be fucking with you from from the woods." So like they would wake up next morning not knowing what they were waking up to. So it wasn't like they were having to remember lines of dialogue on a script or anything. They were just reacting to what they were finding around, and apparently sometimes they would try to go to sleep, and the like directors of the movie were like throwing shit at their tents and like doing shit to like scare them and keep them up at night, like so that they
Yeah.
would be more delirious in the morning when they'd have to walk around and film some more. Like, so I think that that's what makes that movie work, is there's such an element of realness to it. I mean, that's why I to this day I will argue that the greatest horror movie that's ever been made and probably will never get topped is Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because there's so much realness that's happening in that movie.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a movie. It feels like a home video, and it is unsettling.
Well, that's another one that wasn't like micromanaged to, like they gave Toby some money and he shot it for almost nothing. And same thing with Halloween. Like
Yeah.
no one was up John Carpenter's ass about how they're going to make the movie because it was so cheap. Like the fact that it's low budget, when they say, "Oh, there's all this freedom," it's true just because when you get up to a level, like even Sam Raimi was saying in Spider-Man 1, there's a few people in a room. Spider-Man 2, there's a few more. By Spider-Man 3, there were people lined up outside the door to all tell him what they think and what he has to put in the movie. And you
Yeah.
could really tell because by Spider-Man 3, Sam Raimi, I love you, but it's a real
It's the thing that
yeah.
bums me the most about Spider-Man 3 is that I see the good movie hidden inside of it.
Yeah.
And I've always argued that like the way that that movie should have been done is it should have just been a Sandman story with Tobey Maguire getting the symbiote, and then that scene in the church, that's your ending of Spider-Man 3. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like him ripping off the symbiote, it falling on Eddie Brock, cut to credits, and then part 4 we get the Spider-Man Venom movie. But like but just like adding just having that church scene be like 30 minutes before the end of the movie and just trying to get this full Venom storyline crammed into 20 minutes. And like, I'm not like, obviously, when you're a kid, every kid's like, man, Venom's the tits. But like,
Yeah.
definitely the older you get, the more you're like, man, Venom is kind of a lame duck fucking character. Like, all these considered, like, at least like Carnage, it's like, okay, Carnage is fucking a good, like, he is like a Joker level, like chaotic, evil type character. Like, Venom's just like, I'm slightly more twisted than Spider-Man. Spider-Man, like,
Yeah,
there's something that's kind of just like, whatever. But it's
for
such a
sure.
bummer because the stuff with the Sandman, you can tell where's the stuff that Sam Raimi gave a shit, and it was with the Sandman story, and like, there's great emotional beats in there, and he just did not. I think he said multiple times, "I don't want to do a Venom movie." Like, it just
For sure.
wasn't something he was interested in doing, and it was. You can tell that there's no passion in telling that Venom part of the story at all.
Venom screams to me what was kind of very popular about what was wrong with 90s comic books, which was muscles,
Yeah,
awesome, violence, and muscles, which, Image Comics first founded themselves upon, but it wasn't enough to actually sustain. And
yeah.
then later on, I mean, God, Image Comics, this is the same company that publishes Invincible and The Walking Dead and some of the other greatest comic books on the market.
Chew,
It's
my favorite comic book series of all time. Chew.
fuck yeah, chew. Like when you start off with muscles, awesome, bleeds, pouches, and all that other Rob Liefeld stuff. It's like, in the 2000s, that's when comic books kind of are like, hey, art could be good, but let's do some fucking good storytelling too. And as far as I'm concerned, and comic book viewers, readers can hate me, but honestly, that's when I kind of thought comic books actually got good. Like, they were great in the 80s and stuff, and there are some good stuff in the 90s. But when you're talking about well-rounded art and story, they kind of found the balance in the 2000s to
So let
current
me
day.
let
Mm,
me tell you, this is going to be a shameless plug for this weekend as well. But I'm going to be at LA
please.
Comic Con in
Nice.
Los Angeles, and one of the panels that I'm doing at LA Comic Con, it's a Geekscape Presents panel, and I actually don't know who the guests are. All I know is that it's a combination of geeky comics and people in the comic book industry, and I will be playing the role of the card master because
Nice.
I still have all of my 90s Marvel Masterpiece cards. And as you and I both know, the 90s was a cesspool for Marvel.
Yeah.
So we've made a special binder of cards that are just all of the like C, D, and E list characters, and at random I will turn to a page and pull out a card, and this panel of hosts will have to explain how they can work in characters like Slapstick and Mojo into the MCU. So that's kind of the game, is like, pitch me the Slapstick movie. Like convince me that this character wasn't super lame in the 90s and can totally run a franchise. So that's gonna, I'm very excited to play around with that because yeah, the 90s were rough. Um, Fun fact: have you ever heard the rumor of what Spider-Man 4 was supposed to be if or
Yeah.
if Sam Raimi got to do it with Bruce
Yeah.
Campbell?
Yeah, well, I heard the rumor that it was gonna involve the Vulture, and then halfway it was gonna play Felicia Hardy, the Vultress, for some fucking reason, like, not Black Cat, Vultress. It's just like, in a way, I'm kinda glad he didn't
Oh,
get to
that's not
really
the
do
rumor
it.
I heard. I heard the
Okay.
rumor that I had always heard was that Bruce Campbell was going to play Mysterio, and it was
That
going to
would've been amazing.
reveal that all of the cameos from Bruce Campbell in the previous movies were all the same person keeping an eye on Peter Parker, suspecting that he was Spider-Man. um, I don't know if that's just straight up
I don't know,
revisionist
'cause
shit
he
that
was a
they dropped
wrestling
years.
why would he be a wrestling announcer in part 1 then?
Maybe that's when he first got, he saw that and was like, "Oh, hey, I mean, are wrestlers not potential actors?"
I know
Like,
Macho Man Randy Savage's Bonesaw was.
I mean, I think that we're in, honestly, if we're talking about like the golden age of a bunch of stuff, I think we're in like this weird golden age of like dope as shit wrestlers that can turn into actors a lot more smoothly
Yeah.
because like, I don't know. Think about what we grew up with. We had like Hulk Hogan doing fucking Suburban Commando, which, all respect to Suburban Commando, I love the shit out of that movie, but it's not a good movie. But like
Mr.
now it's
Nanny
like,
fucking sucks, by the way. I was
yeah,
on
no,
this
that
whole
didn't hold
phase.
up.
I was rewatching it, and he's trying to act in the movie, you know? And when he tries to act, he tries to act. So it's just like, I just want to do something where I can be more sensitive. And I'm like, no one fucking talks like that.
No.
Nobody. You screaming at the top of your lungs at somebody feels more natural
That's why
than what
Suburban
you just
Commando was
said.
perfect for him as just like the tough as shit, like wannabe Sylvester Stallone action hero.
Hey,
But
what are you doing here? It's like, you know what we're gonna do? It's like, yeah, you're gonna kick my ass. And they're like, no, it's the 90s. We're gonna
I'm gonna
sue you.
sue you. I was frozen today. But like, but now it's like you're looking at like John Cena and Batista, and even like some of these like lesser known people like a
Mm,
Becky Lynch, like they're actually really good actors and actresses when they appear in these movies, and they're not just like the only thing I've been taught how to do is yell and flex. Like they actually like have acting chops and comedic timing that they can like bring to the table where it's like I'm just looking at this whole generation of like the last 10 years of WWE and now AEW wrestlers. And I'm like, man, I'm actually really excited for more of these people to step out of the ring and into like acting roles because like they're really fucking good. Like,
yeah.
how the hell is the Miz not becoming like one of the biggest like comedic actors because he is absolutely hysterical. Even though I like barely watch wrestling, if I hear that Miz cut a promo on Raw, I'm going to look up the video clip because I know
There
I'm
you
going to
go.
laugh. You know what I mean? Like it's like so
Yeah.
let's put him in a comedy, throw him as like a wacky best friend in like a mainstream movie, and
Yeah,
I think that
get him
he'll
in the
blow up.
hangover or something, you know, like
Yes,
one of those. Yeah.
yeah, like don't do the bullshit they've been doing where it's like, oh, he's like him and Paige are going to be in some Christmas movie where they're like Santa's elves or some bullshit. Like, no, like don't like when you take wrestlers and make them into WWE productions, it's fucking
I know.
bad. But
Yeah.
you give them a chance in an actual Hollywood movie where they can have a real director direct them, and it's like, dude, somebody like never in a million years could you have convinced me that John Cena would be as hilarious with his comedic timing as he actually turns out to be when he's given a director who knows how to like do good setup punchline. Like it's very sweet. It's very strange and fun and unexpected. And I want to see more of it.
He's been doing the comedic thing for like over 10 years too. It's not even like an
Yeah.
overnight thing. And my favorite line he did in that movie, oh shit. It's the fucking Judd Apatow movie with Amy Schumer. What's that called again? It's
Oh, Trainwreck.
yeah, Trainwreck, where it's just like, yeah, whatever, Mark Wahlberg, and they're in the movie theater. It's like, hey, Mark Wahlberg weighs 180 pounds soaking wet. I look like I just ate Mark Wahlberg. Who just ate Mark Wahlberg?
He's even. I thought that movie Blockers was fucking hysterical.
I want to
Uh,
check that out, man. I want to
yeah,
check out Blockers. I haven't
Blockers
had
was
time yet.
fun.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it to be, and then like, man, I think that we're well. I don't know. I think that we've made a bunch of really good teen flicks that I don't know any teens who actually saw, but like Blockers, Booksmart, Let It Snow, like I thought that they were all really great teen flicks.
Oh, Let
Uh,
It Snow. I auditioned for that, I think.
really,
Yeah, is that the
I
one
think
on Netflix right now? Is
yeah,
that,
I
yeah,
fucking love
yeah.
that movie because
I'll
there's
check
two
it out.
identical Canadian twins that are in it as like soccer hooligan or hockey hooligans, I guess. But my a good friend of mine knows them from her years acting in Canada. Ashley Victoria Robinson, she hosts an amazing podcast. If you've enjoyed the last 2 hours of us talking, check out Geek History Lesson, where her and her husband Jason will pick just one comic book or pop culture character and spend an hour breaking down their entire comic book, TV, movie career. And basically, it's like, hey, if you're going to go see the Eternals, like, here's an hour breakdown of their entire comic book run so that you know their whole back history before you see the movie so you can follow it better. But yes, super smart, super geeky, but yes, very
Mm.
talented actress as well.
Question. Do you find when you go into a movie such as I haven't seen Eternals yet, but if you go into a movie like Eternals or Guardians of the Galaxy, do you find it much easier to adapt to whatever the fuck you're about to watch had you not known so much of what inevitably the studio would have to change?
Yeah, so I haven't seen Eternals either, and
Mm.
thankfully from everything I've heard, it's like my big thing was like, do I have to see it in order to be able to enjoy the new Spider-Man movie? And the answer I've heard from everybody was like a resounding no. So I was like, all right, well then I will wait for the Eternals to drop on Disney Plus
Yeah.
because I'm sure it will eventually. But with Guardians of the Galaxy, I think that the fact that I didn't know who the fuck those characters were uh, was just what I needed. I also think that it helped that I mean, again, throwing it back to Trauma, going into it knowing it was a James Gunn movie, I was like, I don't think it matters if I know who these characters are. This is gonna be a James Gunn movie, and it's gonna be fucking off the wall, and it was, like in a
If the
huge way,
director of Super is handling this, I'm fucking in
dude,
hardcore.
100%. And then like even like God, did you watch his Suicide Squad that he dropped this year? Like,
Yeah, it's great.
God, such a step up from like what we had.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, and people are like, "Oh, it's not that good," or like, "Oh, the box office, it didn't do well." I'm like, I walked out of the first Suicide Squad not wanting to commit suicide, but understanding why people would, and
yeah, it
it's
was
just
bad. It was
it was a mismanaged, tonally strange, kind of boring. It's supposed to, like, you're watching Will Smith kill the shit out of things. Why don't I care?
yeah,
And it's because they have all these people, but they only kind of, like, like when you see a band and you're like, there's all the Rolling Stones, but you only really know the name of Mick and Keith. It's
yeah.
kind of it's well, I know all their names because I'm a dork like that. But in general, people only know that person and that person. It's kind of like what they did with that movie. You have a squad of people. Can you tell me a little bit more about them besides basic personality traits that would even be too not enough for a Tinder profile?
Yeah, well,
Like,
and
mm,
that's been the problem with the DCU for all these years is like they so badly want their Avengers that they're not willing to put in like the 10 years of work that Marvel did first to be able to do an Avengers movie. Like they're just like, fuck it, we'll make the Justice League first. And then after that, we'll make everybody care about the lesser known characters in the Justice League. And it's like, that's not how it works. like, that's not how it works. You can't just like if they just started out the gate with the Avengers and didn't do any prep work on like who Iron Man was and who the Hulk was and who all the Thor is, that no
yeah,
one would see that movie. They'd be like, "What the fuck is this?" Like, but
I
like
wasn't.
they
Yeah,
built to it. They built to it, and like
mm,
I think that it's so crazy now because you can never explain this to like anyone 10 years younger than us. But like those were not big comics. Like
no,
you know who these characters are now, but like when they were making an Iron Man movie, no one was expecting it to do well. Like he
no,
was a C level at worst, B level at best. Like he was
yeah.
not an A-lister, and now he's arguably more famous than most of the X-Men who were the A-level characters in the comics.
I know, and if it's kind of like if DC, and this is what I really fucking hated about Batman v Superman. And I sound like just another geek on the internet bitching about something. It's like it's been years, get over it. But I'll just say this: it annoys me when potential is there and it's not nurtured.
Yeah.
Like when it comes to the MCU, like you said about Iron Man, here's a character that's not even that big of a deal, but you cast an actor that makes him a real guy. And when you look back on the action in Iron Man 1, there's not even that much of it, really. I
No,
mean,
it's a lot of story.
comparatively to your modern superhero film, he gets kidnapped. He's in a cave. He gets out of the cave. He goes back, kind of says "fuck you" to the guys who put him in a cave, and eventually fights his dad's old friend slash his boss technically, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like there's no world if there's no sky beam, there's no nothing of that. But at the same time, you walk out of there being like, Iron Man's a real dude, and I can fucking get behind this. When it comes to Batman v Superman, and also a C-list character like you're talking about, and Marvel at this point has no Spider-Man, has no X-Men, has no heavy hitters, hit singles, if you want to go, no one-hit wonders of their own, nothing that really screams instant success. And they built their bones on the fact that they can make even the most obscure like character that hasn't hit the mainstream resonate in a way they've never have before, and that is why MCU is what it is.
Yeah.
When it comes to DC, you have the three Mount Rushmore of the most famous superheroes in the fucking world. People who have never spoke English in their life know these symbols. And you couldn't even take any of their characteristics that made the characters who they really are and showcase any of it. It's
No.
kind of like it's like Batman and his reasons for fighting and all that stuff. Ben Affleck, cool. big dude, had muscles, awesome. But re-showing us the fucking pearls in the alley scene isn't enough to show why he's a gun-toting fucking dude right now. I
Yeah.
mean, one scene of Robin getting murdered could have justified his arc.
Yep.
You know, they're implying it, but they
No,
couldn't
but
bother showing you. Yeah.
I think that the other thing that's really interesting in the DCU stuff is like you can tell the best DCU movies have been the ones where you can tell that they had no faith in the film to begin with, and let
Shazam.
yeah, Shazam is fantastic, and you can
It
tell that
is.
absolutely nobody behind the scenes cared. So you can tell, like you said, that there was not a committee of people working on that movie. It was a very singular situation, and it turned into a great movie because of it. I think to a certain extent, the first Wonder Woman falls into that same bucket where
Yeah,
I don't
it's
think
fair.
that they had a lot of they care so much about the Superman Batman side of their company that like if you get any other characters, you're golden. They'll leave you alone and you can make a good movie out of it, possibly. Then Justice League happened and then they got their hands on everybody, and then you get all these unsatisfactory side character movies as well, which is a bummer. But like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm also just at the point where it's like we have seen so many villains in the MCU that never in a million years that I think that we would ever even consider putting into a movie. But then you jump
Mm.
back over to the DCU and it's like, Jesus Christ, can Superman fight somebody that's not tied to Lex Luger? Can someone please can Batman please not have to deal with the Joker again? Like, we're talking about like the fucking Batman, probably second to Spider-Man for the most extensive variety of amazing villains that you can pull from, and we just keep pulling from the same four buckets time and time and time again.
Remaking,
Yeah.
remaking,
Now,
remaking.
I'm kind of excited for what I'm hearing is like this Batman almost a Saul movie with the Riddler. Like,
Fuck
I'll
yeah,
give it a
dude.
shot. Like, let's see how this goes. Like, I'm fine with that. But
Fuck
I'm
yeah.
also my expectations are low because I haven't enjoyed a Batman movie since Christopher Nolan walked away from the franchise. So like not hopefully it's good. Like I really hope it's good. I really hope that it's something different.
Mm.
Um, but I'm also like, why the Riddler for like I like the Riddler, but like
Yeah, but the last
do
time he was on screen, dude, was 20 years ago, and it
no
was
for
kind of a Frank Gorshin cartoon, and, like, it's really cool to see this side of a Riddler where it's almost like in my mind, I'm like, "Well, what the fuck? If Chris Nolan did touch upon the Riddler, he'd probably do what this is doing, to be
yeah.
honest, like the Saw
No, for
version."
sure. I
Yeah.
want it. I think I want someone to do. There was a very short comic book series that DC put out when I had gotten back into reading comics for a couple years called
Mm.
Joker's Asylum. Did you ever read the Joker's Asylum books?
No, I read Joker Black and White, or where Joker's turned into a good guy because of medication and Batman went fucking nuts. And he had
So
to actually use the Batmobile to go catch him. It was pretty
I
fucking
I
rad.
need to read that actually, but
Yeah.
Joker's if they put this out in a collection, you should get it. It was basically like Tales from the Crypt with Joker as the Crypt Keeper, where it was stories of different people in Arkham Asylum, but it was like a way for them to do these really
Mm.
gnarly stories about like other Batman villains. So like they did a
Yeah.
Mad Hatter issue and they did a Penguin issue. And I remember the Penguin issue specifically was like me and my roommate at the time were reading these Joker Asylum books, and we used to always joke around because I think the rumor for a little bit was that Joker or that Penguin was going to be in the next Christopher Nolan Batman movie. And we were like, how do you make that work in his like world of realism? Like it doesn't seem like it would connect. And then this Joker's Asylum comic came out, and we're like, okay, that's how you do it. Like you lean into like the kid who was born deformed, mocked by his classmates, becomes like a mob boss. Like I can see
Mm.
that now in my head as like a because my version of the Penguin for the longest time is still like Danny DeVito walking around like in a giant onesie covered in slime. Like it's like that's not really the Penguin.
Yeah.
But yeah, the story that they do in this Joker's Asylum is like the Penguin as a kid at school being bullied and like accidentally killing the one girl that he loves in school with a bunch of birds when he intends for them to attack a bully. And it's like this
Wow.
heartbreaking, beautiful origin story. But yeah, if you can, I don't know if they ever put them into a collection or what. I think it was 2 runs of 6 issues that they did. So like 12 issues combined. But holy shit. They're like, when I sold off a bunch of my comics, because I was just like, you move enough times and you've got like 7 long boxes that you're lugging around, and you're finally like, when am I ever going to crack these open again? And you kind of consolidate to the ones that you really want. The Joker's
Mhm.
Asylum stayed with me. Like, I brought, I don't think I'm ever going to read the other like 75 Detective Comics run that I was like 75 issue Detective Comics run that I was reading monthly, but
Yeah.
like these 12 Joker's Asylum books, like I probably will crack open again one day and reread. But yeah, I just think there's so many interesting characters. There's so much interesting stories to mine. Like, just give it a rest on the goddamn Joker already. There's no new story you can tell me at this point that I won't feel like I've already seen.
Well, I saw it a little bit in the show Titans, but I really did want to see a little bit more of an exclusive death in the family type
Yeah,
situation where the animated movie Death in the Family is Under the Red Hood, I should say, is probably one of the best DC animated films they ever made, like in the top 5. And it's amazing because they took ideas from the comic book, but they actually really improved upon the comic, because the comic is kind of like a little all over the place, especially Death in the Family. Like, it's fucking weird. The Joker
yeah.
becomes an ambassador for the Middle East. It's kind of all over the fucking place,
That's
but yeah.
that's the weird irony, right? That Marvel can absolutely crush DC as far as film adaptations go, but like Marvel can't hold a candle to like the DC animation team.
I
Like DC
know.
animation like kills it. Um, what's one that I would
Except
have
X-Men the Animated Series, though, they kind of were really good at telling you the Phoenix Saga. Like, the
yeah.
Phoenix Saga is everywhere, and they
Yeah.
contained it, and they're just like, this is what you need to know.
I'm excited for X-Men 97, dude. When
Me
that
too,
drops
dude.
on, that's gonna be huge. You know what? So there was a you remember Cracked magazine?
Oh yeah.
Did you ever listen to the Cracked podcast?
No, but I love
So
the cracked YouTube content they came out with. It was fucking great.
so for a while, I mean, Cracked fell apart when they fired like a bunch of their big writers and their big YouTube personalities, which is really unfortunate because like the After Hours sketches were like some of the
So
most brilliant,
fucking good.
so good.
Yeah.
So the Cracked podcast for a while was all of the people from After Hours, just doing a podcast together, and
Wow.
they did one episode that was like top 10 comic books that should become movies. And I ended up adding, I don't have all of them, but I put a lot of those graphic novels on my Amazon wish list and like would slowly work through them. But one of the big ones that they talked about was they mostly stuck with indie books, right? It was
Yeah.
like, oh, you should do like the world's like this boy genius comic or whatever. But the one
Mm.
I think it was Michael Swain was like, we've seen so many Batman movies, but I really think that we need the longest Halloween, like the long Halloween as a movie. Like, I think that that is the
Mm.
movie that we need to do. So he was like explaining it, and I picked up the graphic novel because I had heard about it. And 100%, dude, how has that not become like when they were talking about like, oh, they're doing a Batman movie and it's going to be like a Jigsaw movie? I'm like, oh shit, they're finally going to do the long, the long Halloween. And
Yeah.
and I mean, I still think they should. To this day, I'm like, that is the story to tell. If you want to do an R-rated, like horror-esque Batman story, do that one because I think that there is so much to pull from that story that's exciting. And now it's kind of been like a story that's told so many times that like it probably won't
Mm.
have the punch that it should, but
Yeah.
I'm excited about it.
There was an animated one that came out last
Which
year.
I'll have to check that out. I'll have to check that out.
Ye
I've fallen so dude. This
Mm.
pandemic, I used to be like Mr. on top of everything. I had my AMC, my Regal take my AMC pass, my Regal pass, and my movie pass when that was a thing. Like I was just like a movie a day in the theaters, was on top of every Netflix drop. And now it's like there's like 14 movies coming out that are out in theaters right now that I want to see. But it's also tied to like you're doing the self-employed thing again, where it's like that's 3 hours that I could be doing work that could be like paying the bills instead of seeing a movie. So it's been like once a month, I'll be like, oh, I really want to see Ghostbusters. So let me go see Ghostbusters. And like,
Yeah.
I carve out that like 3 hours in my day to make sure that I can do that activity. But it used to just be like, clock out at work at 5 and drive to the movie theater for a 5:30 showing of whatever movie came out that week. Um,
Yeah,
so that,
but it used to be a release because you didn't have enough time to do it, and you put in your work for the day, so it's almost like, "Well, I went to work today, so here's my reward."
exactly.
But, life at this point is a little bit of a reward, so it's kind of like, how do you stop? How do you put a pin in it? Like I work at home too,
Yeah.
so it's a little hard. Like a lot of the stuff I want to watch is on the ready on the TV at all times, but I won't watch a movie I want to see while working because I'm not watching the movie. So if
100%.
so if I'm like, oh, it wasn't that good. Well, yeah, asshole. It's because you missed a bunch of you missed a bunch of tone and build up because you were distracted and kind of like giving it your half-assed viewing of it. So
I've got so much
mm,
Netflix stuff that are in those buckets. It's like,
I know
these are the shows and movies that I'll put on if I'm editing because I'm only, like, vaguely interested in it, and I probably will, like, lose interest halfway through it anyway. And then
yeah,
there's, like, no, this is the stuff where it's like, I'm gonna make lunch and sit down for an hour and watch an episode of this show because I really wanna give it as much time and energy as I can possibly grant it.
for
But
sure.
it's a tough balance.
Dude, there's so much fucking like you have a podcast, Christmas 360, and I gotta check that out. But I love Christmas, and new stuff comes out all the time. In fact, there's this new show that just dropped on Netflix called Elves that looks
Just
really
watched it
fucking cool.
today. It's
Yeah,
fun. It's
yeah,
fun. It's
I gotta
very
see.
Stranger Thingsy.
Oh,
So
cool, cool.
I
Well,
recommend it. Yeah.
I really like Rare Exports. Like that movie was fucked up, and even when the movie isn't in English, I'm just like fucking rad. They find like a tomb of Santa Claus, but he's this big evil fucking thing, and it's real. There's so much good shit out there. Fat Man with Mel Gibson's really fucking good too,
Yeah.
where it's like. Here's Santa. Well, what if Santa existed? Well, he would work for the government. And what would the elves look like? And just like Santa, like the idea that a kid if Santa Claus existed in a world and this spoiled kid who wants revenge against anybody who fucks with him, naturally, if he gets coal, of course he's going to hire a fucking hitman to go after Santa. But what if Santa Claus is a little crazy? And what
Yeah.
if Santa Claus has seen and done it all and can probably light a match on his fucking face? Like you're like, shit. And when I first heard about Fat Man, I was like expecting it to be some sort of machete type of grindhouse over the top action film, but I was pleasantly surprised when it felt more like a Coen brother movie.
I'll have to check.
And
I still haven't seen Fat Man. I remember the trailers for that, and then I forgot it was even a thing.
dude, it's
Um,
rad. And the two directors are super nice. Yeah, they're these two brothers, and it was shot in Ottawa, Canada. But don't hold that against it. Um, it actually was made with a lot of love, and it's clearly like not a $1 zillion movie, but I don't know, dude. As a lover of horror and or action and a lover of Christmas, I think you should. I think it would pique a lot of your interest,
Alright,
actually.
I'll check it out. I'll tell you the
Mm,
2 films of this year that are, like, my hard recommends for people, like, of the new Christmas content,
sure.
and one's barely even a Christmas movie, but Black Friday with
Oh,
Bruce
I'm gonna see
Campbell.
that later tonight. Actually, yeah,
It's
yeah.
awesome, awesome,
Fuck
strap in,
yeah,
it's a really good time.
fuck yeah,
And then HBO Max, arguably one of the top 3 movies of the whole year for me, 8-Bit Christmas was
fuck yeah,
just
dude. I saw it yesterday.
incredible. It's so
Yes.
good. It's so good. It's so heartwarming. It's so funny. There's everything works in that movie. And like the
Yeah,
more I think about it, the more I like that movie because I'm like, dude, this movie operates on kid logic for the entire movie, and I fucking love that about it.
it's
Um,
perfect. All the adults are against them. There's not like
yeah,
that one adult that's helping them out, and that's the classic 1980s. Like, everyone talks about Goonies, but let's say Monster Squad of it
yeah,
all.
we'll throw
Uh,
Monster Squad in there. Yeah, or even
yeah.
like Flight of the Navigator, or like any of those
Mm,
those kids against the parents movies. Even ET, like ET, none of the parents wanted to keep ET around.
yeah.
So you have that going, but even just like I love the idea, and this is hey guys, check out 8-Bit
Mm.
Christmas. Maybe
Fuck
hit like
yeah.
the skip button a couple seconds,
It's
but
on
like
Crave in Canada. Yeah.
there you go. Thank you, because I was like, I know it's on HBO Max. I don't know if they get that, but like
Mm.
even stuff like casting what is clearly like a 30-year-old man to play the school bully because like as a kid that is how you imagine your school bully.
I
Like it's
loved it.
fucking brilliant. Like that's so
Fucking brilliant.
smart. It's so
Yeah.
funny. So I that's all I'm gonna say is that it's great and that I cried at the end. Like go see
Oh,
8-Bit Christmas.
ditto.
Like,
Ditto. I did not see well, look, whatever, no
yeah.
spoilers.
Yeah,
But
no spoilers, but
let's
yeah.
just say for a film like and it really touches upon a Christmas story in a sense where it's an older person talking about reminiscing about their youth in a time that has long passed and the wanting of something for Christmas that the parents don't want to give them. That kind of reminds me of a Christmas story, except NPH, Neil Patrick Harris can be seen in this movie, and there is
Yeah.
interactions between the past and the present.
So I can tell you for a
Mm,
fact, the head of Geekscape is actually friends with the guy who wrote both the book 8-Bit Christmas and then got hired to write the screenplay for the movie adaptation.
fuck
Um,
yeah, man!
and
Please give them a hug.
yeah, and
Well,
he
or a long
he
distance one.
he said on they interviewed him on Geekscape to promote the movie, and he
Mm,
said, and I quote, "A Christmas Story isn't just my favorite Christmas movie, it's my favorite movie of all time, and that's what this has always been, is a love letter to that movie." So it's like when people are like comparing it to the Christmas Story, it's like that is exactly what it is supposed to be. Like just
good.
strap in, enjoy the modern day version of the Christmas Story. I'll say controversially better than the Christmas Story. I
Mm.
think I'm over a Christmas Story. It's not even my favorite Bob Clark Christmas film. Um,
More into Black
Black Christmas,
Christmas.
yeah, and
Bob
Black
Clark.
Xmas from 2006, which you produced. A brilliant
Black
mind.
Christmas, man. Sorry, Bob Clark is an anomaly. He started three genres,
Yep.
like the family Christmas film with a little of quirkiness, the fucking slasher horror movie, arguably like one of the first ones ever,
Yeah.
and the fucking sexy comedy with Porky's.
Yep.
It's fucked up, man. This
It's
guy,
crazy.
yeah,
It well, and like most people don't know this, but like Halloween wouldn't exist without Black Christmas because the idea for Halloween came from John Carpenter talking to Bob Clark about how much he liked Black Christmas. And I
yeah.
forget where I read this, but he asked Bob Clark, would he ever consider doing a sequel? And Bob Clark said no. But if I was to do a sequel, it would be the character from Black Christmas escaping from an insane asylum to kill babysitters on Halloween night. And John Carpenter was like, "Can I make that movie?" And he was like, "Yeah, go for it." And like Halloween was born. And I actually love watching Black Christmas and then putting on Halloween, and it really flows into each other fairly well as a sequel. Like if you just remove the opening scene of Michael killing his sister and just take it from the scene of Loomis driving to the hospital, like it totally makes sense that they are basically like companion pieces.
Absolutely. And oh man, Black Christmas so cool. And there's a second remake of Black Christmas that came out a year or two ago that I've been
Yeah,
really meaning to see. I
it's
also
all
hear
right.
that I also hear the new I also hear the new fucking Slumber Party Massacre is pretty cool. Like
I haven't seen it yet, but I hear it is fantastic. Like my
I hear it's
co-host Scott
fantastic. Yeah.
raved about it.
Yeah.
So,
I'm so fucking
you know,
jazzed that you like 8-Bit Christmas as much as I do, because I was like, okay, this checks all my boxes. It must be cool. But
yeah.
then when you're watching it, you're just like, man, Steve Zahn and everybody else, like it just they're running after a retainer, and I'm just like on the edge of my fucking seat. I have seen superheroes fight CGI armies of aliens, and this fucking retainer has me on the edge of my seat
I was
more
so
than
when
any
that
of this.
retainer fell down in the toy store, I was like, "Oh no!" Like I was legitimately like, "Oh, this kid's gonna get killed by his dad." Um,
Yeah.
I honestly like I there's still a month to go, and
Mm,
Spider-Man is in that month. But like
yeah.
I'm pretty confident in what my top three of the year are, and I really think 8-Bit Christmas is gonna be in the top three. Like it's gonna be sitting there with Ghostbusters and the Machines versus the Mitchells. Like just a good there was some great stuff that came out this year. Great
Yeah.
television. It was great. Like all things considered, 2021 may have kind of still been like the dipping our toe in the water to see if it's safe to go for a swim back into life
Yeah. Of
again. But the
course.
fucking entertainment side of things did not disappoint this year.
Look, I've been saying it for the entire pandemic. I'm like, if people have not been paying attention to geek shit, the last 4 years of geek television is some of the best shit they've ever fucking made. And
Yeah.
it's insane the well you could dive into if you really want. Like one dude, some Fridays I would wake up and I would watch Invincible and the Mighty Ducks. I'm a big Mighty Ducks guy, and I can't remember oh yeah, and Captain America, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, like all
Yep.
in the same day would drop, and I'm just like, That's fucking crazy when you think like
I
this is your weekly content. And that was like above all the other shit that was coming out.
similarly was
Yeah.
I remember, I drove down to Baltimore, which is only like an hour and a half drive,
Yeah.
where my co-host from Christmas 365 lives, and he was
Mm.
spending the night at his girlfriend's house, but he gave me the key to his house to crash there for the night, and then he would show up in the morning for us to record. So we were recording on a Friday morning, and I remember I woke up and exactly as you said, quickly watched The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Then I quickly watched Invincible, and he still wasn't there. So I watched the newest episode of RuPaul's Drag Race that morning.
Nice.
Like it was like, yeah, no, like that was my Fridays. Was like when I would clock in when I was still working at my desk job. It was like clock in, put myself low in the queue for about an hour and a half so I could watch all the geeky shit that had just come out that Friday
Yeah.
morning, and then like bump myself to the highest level of the queue to make up for the stats that I had just like kind of nosedived for 2 hours.
Yeah, but it's but when you see shit and it's so good, like Invincible is a great fucking show.
Yeah,
And I've read the comic books, and the comic books are cool. And I read the comic books afterwards because that's the best way to do it. Because if you read the comics beforehand, you're like, hey, they changed this, this, and this. But then when you just watch it, you're like, oh shit, cool.
oh, that's cool that they
Oh
changed that and that. Yeah,
yeah,
well, and
yeah. I'm
that's
like,
even like
oh, they made
because
his best friend an actual character now. Oh,
yeah,
that's awesome. Because in the
dude,
you know,
and even the if we're
mm,
gonna talk about that, like I'll say that the Boys TV show is a million times better than the Boys comic book ever could dream to have been.
well, the
Like,
boys comic book knew exactly what it was, which is kind of like 90s self-indulgent violence, but had more of a story.
yeah,
But I got it, man. Dude, Huey in the fucking show, if you didn't feel that heartbreak that he has and the reasons why he wants to, fucking slap the cape's back and all that, it wouldn't work, man. And
yeah,
they have that in the comic book, but they don't have it in the comic book. And
yeah,
also the sexual assault that it's almost gratuitous in the comic book where it's three guys and her, and then and then in the show it's just the Deep being a horrible
yeah.
guy. It
It's
seems a little bit more plausible, which makes it more horrifying because
and
it's
I
not so cartoonishly
Yeah, and The
over the
Boys
top.
season 2 had something
Mm,
that it had in common with another show, comic book adaptation season 2. I think The Boys season 2 is a huge step up from season 1,
mm.
similarly to, and season 3 is just around the corner now, but Umbrella Academy. Like, the
Oh yeah.
first season of Umbrella Academy, I'm like, "Oh, that was fun." But
Mhm.
season 2, I was like, "Holy shit, this is good." So,
Yeah.
like, I mean, you're not lying. We are at a peak with the geeky stuff is absolutely killing it right now. I still have to watch Sweet Tooth. I read all the Sweet Tooth comics in
Fuck yeah,
preparation for
dude.
this show, and
Oh,
then I
shit, as a
forgot to watch the
Henson
show.
fan as a
Yeah,
fucking Henson fan, you feel some dark, like, that 80s kind of like, "Let's just fucking do it."
yeah,
Like, "Let's go." It's about kids, but it could get fucking dark. Like, yeah, Sweet Tooth is badass.
it's
Have
such
you
a
ever
good
seen
one.
have you ever seen Happy?
Yes, Happy was great. Happy
Fucking
was so
great.
much fun, and
Yeah.
that's God, the other problem with the pandemic, though, the flip side of it is that
Mm.
so much good stuff was coming out so fast that there's stuff that I watched and loved, and I couldn't gun to my head, I couldn't tell you anything about so many of these shows because I was just digesting a season of television every day while sitting at my desk.
I know.
And then it just kind of like falls out the back of your brain as you start the next one because you're not like I love that now we're doing weekly drops because it's allowing me to like sit on information again. Ver
Yeah.
like my I don't think that I would love Ted Lasso as much as I love Ted Lasso if I didn't have to spend a whole week geeking out with my friends about like what do you think's going to happen with Nate? Like like you get like those you get the water cooler show is back. It's just through like text groups now.
WandaVision wouldn't have worked if
No,
there wasn't that mystery.
people would have
Because
bailed, I think. People who
yeah.
didn't get what it was would have bailed so quickly. I was all in because I love
Mm,
50s sitcoms, so I was like,
me
"Fuck
too.
yes." Like, this is great.
Yeah.
But, yeah,
And,
no.
and allowing that mystery to resonate and having conversation. I was part of a Facebook group that was debating everything, and yes,
Yeah,
everyone thought Mephisto was everything. That's actually a true thing. But, yeah, I do really like the weekly episode drops because I remember watching Stranger Things season 3, and I don't really remember what happens in it besides
yeah.
the mall. And that's a
Which
shame in a way, you
it
know?
is, because I agree
Yeah.
with you that, like, I remember watching season 3 after feeling kinda lukewarm towards season 2, and watching
Mhm.
season 3 and being like, "Oh, this is why I love Stranger Things the first time around." Like, it was, like, capturing all that energy, but yeah, it's like, I remember the mall stuff. I don't
Yeah.
remember anything else that happened. I just remember that the mall was really fun and that I enjoyed hanging out with the characters when they were hanging out in the mall.
Yeah. And the whole binge watch thing, like when Daredevil and all those Marvel shows first dropped, my friend, this is so long ago now. My friends and I are like, let's watch all of season one in one day. We'll make a pact. We'll get some pizza. We'll get some beer. We're going to fucking do this. And by the time you get to like episode 11 or 12, you're just like, after watching shit for 12 hours, it's just, you're kind of waiting for it to end at that point. You're like,
And
I'm in, and I'm not watching it because I'm enjoying it anymore and I'm not appreciating nuance anymore. I'm just like literally just, going until I drop. And that's no way to consume entertainment.
no, that's how I did
No.
Orange is the New Black season 2. was
Mm,
was because all of my friends loved season 1 so much that we were
okay.
like, "Season 2 drops on this day. Let's all just hang out. We'll all binge watch it together." And yeah, like, absolute same by, like, the 10th episode, I was just like, "Oh my god, why
Yeah.
are these episodes so fucking long?" Like, I was just getting then it's like something like, "I Think You Should Leave." It's like, absolutely, I'm gonna binge that in one day. Those are
Yeah.
20-minute episodes, they're hilarious, and I don't wanna miss, like, a single moment of what becomes a meme out of this. Like
The, yeah.
but it is, there is
Mm.
that balance. I think we're getting better at knowing, like, what's the shows like, I wouldn't be mad if Netflix was like, "Hey, we're gonna do Stranger Things as a weekly drop." I'd be like, "Fucking yes, let's do it." I think more people would be pissed about that, though, so I'm sure that that'll
Probably.
never happen, but, like, I think that those types of shows actually lend themselves to the weekly drop so much better. Um,
Hmm.
and then, yeah, like, "Hey, here's a sketch comedy show. Here's Nailed It." Like, yeah, just drop that on one day, and I'll just sit there and I'll spend 4 hours and rock through all 6 episodes of Nailed It. Like,
Yeah.
whatever, that's fine. Like, it's
I
same
can't,
with,
I
like,
can't,
Queer Eye. Like, I'll rock through a full
mm,
season of Queer Eye in a day because it's gonna just make me feel all good and happy inside for 6 hours, and then I'm, like, back to my life.
I can't tell if it was a mistake or not for them to release Masters of the Universe Revelations in two parts, because it made the first 4 or 5 episodes like resonate a lot more. But at the same time, every mouth breathing idiot that doesn't give a shit about fucking plot and barely has paid attention to He-Man, but is so fucking up their ass about, oh, Tila has any kind of attention whatsoever, fucking like bombast Kevin Smith on the internet for months at a time because they dare killed He-Man for a few fucking episodes, and then all these other characters actually had a reason for existing. If they just put out the entirety of the show, which Kevin Smith intended to, then nobody would have been shitting on it as much. But at the same time, like you were saying, it's just like, as someone who could wait and did have the emotional intelligence to be like, they're not going to kill the titular hero of a huge franchise forever.
Yeah.
I know that,
Yeah,
but
no one's ever what's the saying? It's like, "No one's ever dead in comic books except for Uncle Ben."
yeah,
Like, it's
yeah,
it's just
s-
like any fantasy thing, they'll find a fucking way. Like, so much like,
mm,
god damn it, they killed Buffy, what, 3 times?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we just expect that our geeky heroes are gonna eventually come back. It doesn't leave much of a it's like they're not dead until the actor who plays them's dead, then they're probably actually gone. But
Yeah, yeah. So, do you think it was like a mistake for them to break it up into part one and two? Because it seems like part one stormed the internet in a sense where people were outraged, but it was still attention. But part two comes out, and I haven't really heard a whisper
yeah, it
about
was
it.
crickets.
Yeah.
I think that I don't I honestly don't like the idea of breaking anything up into, like, the I hate it when, like, TV shows on actual cable would do that, where it's like, this
Hmm.
is season 7A, and then, like, we gotta wait 3 months to get, like, season 7B. Like,
Hmm.
you know how much plot you forget waiting for 3 months to pass by? Like,
Yeah.
and not everyone's gonna sit there and be like, "Oh," especially, like, when it was, like, television stuff where, like, I forget what show there was some of the shows on Hulu, I remember, it was like they would only hold the 3 most recent episodes. So it's like God forbid you want a refresher on this season that's not available on DVD yet because they're waiting to air the second half of the season. Like you can't even rewatch the whole first half lead. Like it was just, I've
Yeah.
never liked that as a practice. Like if you're gonna drop weekly, drop fucking weekly. If you're gonna drop it all at once, drop it all at once. But like don't drop half of it and then like a month or two later drop the other half of it. It was kind of actually I was not so I was in the minority when it came to people who really, really liked the the Fear Street movies when they came
Cool.
out over the summer. But like
Mm.
the biggest thing that I had to complain about was that I thought that they were dropping them too quickly. Like I was like,
Mm.
why drop these once it didn't make sense to me. It was like, why drop them 3 weeks in a row in August? It's a Halloween story, like, drop it
Yeah.
once a month. Drop the first episode in August, the second episode in September, and then, like, the third episode during October would have been fucking perfect. I don't think it would have made me like the show anymore, but it would have given me more time to, like, sit with the first movie, digest
Mm.
it, kind of feel like maybe watch it a second time to see if I changed my mind before the next movie came out. But, like, just, like, one after another, I was just like, I pushed through all three of them, and I wanted to like it so much, and I hated seeing how many people were loving it, and I was like, "I wanna
Okay.
love it too." Like, it's
You
like
know what, man? I really did fucking like him, but I put myself in a position where I was gonna like him.
yeah,
Like my girlfriend and I, we had we had an advanced link to watch them the night before they would drop and stuff. So like it's nighttime. Let's get comfortable and let's like have ourselves an old fashioned movie night as if we're catching this on cable. Cause if we
yeah,
don't push play at this exact time, we're gonna fucking miss it.
yeah,
And that was kind of cool. Had I was just been digesting it for the sake of digesting it, a friend of mine, they got a friend of mine, Brian, he has a podcast called High School Slumber Party, and
yeah,
it's excellent, and he's a wonderful host. And his co-host that day was this girl named Kate Hudson, not the actress, and she grew up reading the books of Fear Street.
yeah,
And this interpretation of Fear Street's kind of in name only. Like
yeah.
they don't
No,
go for
I
the cheese
remember that
ball.
much, yeah,
They don't go for the cheese ball R.L. Stein stuff. So it was weird listening to his podcast. Like here, Melissa and I had this wonderful experience watching these things. But then I'm listening to the podcast that they would both watch the show at like 8 a.m. the day it drops in order to be able to record it. And, and she is totally, and Kate is totally fucking pissed because it's, not the books.
yeah,
And I'm like thinking, how many conversations must people have heard me say the same thing about comic books based on all this media coming out? So I'm like, I'm feeling her pain because
yeah,
when you wait your whole life to see a Fear Street movie, she's not liking it in a sense where it's just like she's not really a horror person, and this isn't the books she liked. And it's also in a sense I'm like, and they also are watching it in the early mornings and not allowing themselves to like it. So I've consumed media in a sense where I need to see it before the fucking world tells me what happens at the end of
yeah,
Mandalorian season 2. True fucking story. Had to watch it at 9 a.m. to make sure fucking geek websites didn't ruin it. And it's like, and I'm like, I was almost bitter because I was like, didn't want to watch a show that day, but I just did it to make sure the world couldn't fucking ruin it.
yeah. It sucks. It sucks that we have to, like, live in that world. And, yeah,
Mm.
like, especially I think what bumped so I was late to 1994.
Hmm.
So I already had all the hot takes floating around while I watched it, which didn't help. Um,
Ah.
I wished my biggest thing was like I have no problem with that movie being a witch movie, but I felt like it played its hand that it was going to be a witch movie so early where I was like, because like it's like the second scene is them explaining the origins of this like witch story, and I'm like, dude,
Mm.
save it a little bit, let it be like a teen slasher movie for a little bit, and then reveal the witch later. But one of my favorite tweets that anyone wrote about it, and it I kept laughing while watching the movie just because I had read this tweet with someone had written, man, I can't remember what year this Fear Street movie is based out of. If only there was era appropriate needle drops every 3 minutes to remind me. So like as I'm watching it, it's like every like you could set a fucking timer. Every 5 minutes, a different song that you fucking loved from the 90s starts like blaring in that movie. So every time a song would play,
Yeah.
I would laugh because I would think about the tweet. and then I would start singing along with the song because goddamn, if the '90s weren't just like ripe for amazing songs that like still endure in my soul to this day. But yeah, I maybe one day I'll sit down after like the dust is settled a little bit more and give it a rewatch, and I'm sure like now going into it being like, well, I remember I hated these. I'll like suddenly be like, oh my god, these are amazing. Like I think that I was going into it with the like everyone says that this is like the greatest shit that's ever happened. So like my bar was so high that I'm like maybe
Yeah.
going in with the bar
There you
really
go.
low,
There
it'll
you
be
go. Oh my
different.
god.
Yeah.
Sometimes when someone's like, "Oh my god, this will fucking this film will cure cancer," like
Yeah.
it's the worst thing in the world, but kind of as an ambassador of joy that we both are, we get excited and we're like, "Oh my god, you should fucking see this thing," because that's my favorite thing in the world is finding something really fun and saying the first thing I want to do is just I want everyone to feel as good as I just did.
Yeah.
That's the first
I
thing.
had I had to rush to so I
Mm,
was in Pittsburgh for a Punchline show last weekend, I guess it was when the Ghostbusters movie came out. And I was getting so many people texting me and telling me how great it was that I was like,
ah,
all right, I get home Sunday night. First thing Monday, I have to see this movie before any more people like set
yeah,
this bar to an unachievable level. And I'm so glad I did because I did love the movie. And I still think that I would love the movie regardless. But I think that if I had waited months and had
mm,
people telling me time and time again how amazing it was, I'd
yeah,
almost go into it with this kind of like, shut the fuck up. This can't be that good. It can't be as good as you guys have made it out to be type attitude that would have completely ruined the movie for me by the time that I like got around to watching it because there is like I'm not sure if you've ever done this, but like I've definitely had issues, especially as a teenager specifically, but like when too many people all tell me at once how much I'm going to love a thing, it doesn't make me want to see it more. It actually makes me want to see it less because I almost
yeah.
feel like well, now you're making it hard because I'm sure I would love this if I discovered it on my own, but now it's been recommended by so many people that like the expectation is like quadrupled itself and like I need to like let
Oh
that
yeah,
expectation lower itself again and go into it with no expectation and take it in as it is and all natural, not already be like hyped up on like, oh, this is what's going to happen and this is going to pop up. Like, I'm not going to spoil Ghostbusters Afterlife, but like enough people even just telling me how much it made them cry immediately within the first like 3 minutes. I'm like, okay, I bet I know what happens. That like
yeah,
because I
yeah.
knew
That's
that I was supposed to cry. Like,
I know, especially in opening day. That's why like I saw Avengers Endgame and I made a Facebook group that said I saw Avengers Endgame and I need a place to talk about it because I'm just kind of like if you go online and say, "Oh, it fucking ruled, best Marvel movie ever," that's almost a spoiler in a sense.
yeah.
Like I had this amazing experience in an audience seeing everything for the first time. I barely watched a trailer for it. And I'll never forget that, how fresh it felt because all the other Marvel movies I watched trailers for, I'm like, no, I really don't want to see a fucking thing.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give an impression. I want to hear how the ending, like nothing. So I just started to create these groups just so people can be like, yes, I get it. You're excited. You want to share. But at the same time, someone who's working a full time job and can only see this Monday does not deserve to have less of an experience than you because they are shackled by their responsibilities in life.
Well, and that's again, like you said, like it's the I feel like everything related to the internet, it's like positive, negative, right?
Mhm.
Like live tweeting events is so much fun. You know, I fucking love I haven't done it in a really long time, but years ago, like I would love watching wrestling and be on Twitter, like watching people live tweet and stuff because there's some really fucking funny people out there.
Yeah.
But then like the flip side of it is then you fucking hate Twitter though when it's like, oh man, I've got to go do this thing, so I'm gonna have to watch the Money in the Bank pay-per-view first thing Monday morning. And
Yeah.
it's like you're like, well, I certainly can't go on Twitter because like all the accounts I follow are strictly for wrestling live tweeting. So everyone's going to give away the results of every single fucking match the second that I log in there. So it's like it is. It's this double edged sword. Everything tied to the internet is a double edged sword,
Mhm.
sincerely. But again, at the end of the day, the great communicator, the connector, bringing beautiful minds like yours and mine together to
Mm.
spend almost 3 hours just becoming best friends talking about geeky shit that we love and I hope one day you'll have me on again so we can continue another 3-hour conversation about all the geeky shit that we love.
I will say this, like, and partied a lot. In the most Canadian accent I can muster. Yeah, partied a lot in my life, and um, but no, my favorite thing about going to any house party or whatever was finding the one dude with a Superman T-shirt or Spider-Man shirt, and finding the corner, and all of a sudden having this explosively, that sounds sexual.
Yeah.
Explosively, like exaggeratingly happy, um, full of endorphin conversation with somebody you just met, based on the fact that you love the same shit. And while everyone else is making small talk about weather and bands they might like, you're connecting with somebody who, like, you have no business being this instantly connected to, because geeks like us have the ability to love things so much, as
Yeah.
much as nerds can hate things. It's a gift to be this empathetic towards the art we love. And I would rather have the ability to have the worst day ever. Stan on South Park said this in the goth episode, and it really stuck with me.
Yeah.
No, Butters said it, where he's just like, "Yo, yeah, you know, I'm feeling really sad, but it means it's because I was really happy." And I'm like, "Yeah, that makes sense. Like, it's the roller coaster. It's like it's the
Yeah.
the gift of feeling and having the best day ever, and being able to feel every fucking fiber of your being is so fucking elated at this exact moment. You'll have your shitty days, but it's the sacrifice you have to do to have that seesaw, because there's some people in this world that will never feel here. They will feel here, but they'll never feel here, but they can't ever get to here. And getting to here makes it all fucking worth it." Yeah.
100% love it. I agree with you that going to a party and bumping into that dude who's in the exact same weird shit that you are, and then like you said, but sometimes it turns into holding court, which is like the even better part, is like when your passion talking about this stuff with this other person becomes so infectious that people just start kind of gravitating towards wanting to just witness the conversation and see the passion that's like flowing between two people about a topic. That's why people love podcasting so much too, is they want to see that super hyped up passion about shit
Yeah.
in weekly in their ears. So if you
Awesome.
want to start a podcast of your own, check out weknowpodcasting.com so Chris and I can help you guys out.
Yeah, and right before we go, speaking of Chris Fafalios, I hope I'm saying that right. Because of his and Krista Makes a Podcast, well, Krista Makes and their podcast called Krista Makes a Podcast, I have given love to songs that I brushed off being too cool for school as a punk rock teenager, was never paying attention to Yellow Card or Newfound Glory or any of these other bands. I just was too cool for fucking school. And the spotlight they put on it and the stories behind the songs, it's really kind of amazing, actually, that it's given me all this interest in music that I ignored for half my life, and I can really acknowledge good songwriting for good songwriting now that I'm older and not up my own ass.
It
So
also
yeah.
introduces me to songs I never had heard before and fallen in love with. This week's episode with that MMC song,
Fucking
I was like
cool.
I was like, "What the fuck is this song? This is amazing."
Amazing. Yeah, exactly. That guy is so fucking rad. And I was listening to his other music too, and I'm like, and it's really great because not every song is the same either. He just does his own thing, man. Podcasts are beautiful like that. But thank you for coming on the show, Matthew, because I'm gonna watch Freaked now, hardcore, and I'm going to read the Joker's Asylum comic books, definitely, because your enthusiasm for it is
That's what I'm here
is
for.
quite contagious. May I make a suggestion? I'm sure you have seen this just because you're in the Christmas and the horror business, so you must have seen this. But have you seen Anna and the Apocalypse?
We actually did an episode of it we did a whole month of musicals on Christmas
Nice.
365, and then end it with Anna and the Apocalypse. Um, I really like Anna and the Apocalypse.
Hmm.
Uh, I think that the first hour is a lot stronger than the third act in that movie for whatever reason.
I'm told that, yeah.
And actually similar. So Anna and the Apocalypse reminds me of a show that is very native to your country, which is Todd and the Book of Pure Evil's musical
Okay.
episodes.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like every time I watch Anna and the Apocalypse, I want to then sit down and binge watch both seasons of Todd. Which I did after we watched End of the Apocalypse. I was like, I'm gonna dust off my Todd and the Book of Pure Evil DVDs because I haven't watched them in
Nice.
like a decade. And dude, you guys have really given us some, because you guys got the full run of Clone High USA, which we got like 4 episodes in the States. I think you got the full season. Um, and
Yeah.
and that's coming back now finally on HBO Max, and I guess by extension Crave over on your guys' side. But dude, all the Canadian stuff, it's so great. I talk about this with my friend Gelsey all the time. Like all the stuff coming out of Canada, I fucking love it. And it's like,
It's really fucked up in the 90s. I was always, Canada always was like, yeah, our shit's okay, I guess, but fuck the American stuff. I didn't realize that half the kids programming I was watching was produced down the fucking street.
yep,
Like, I
yep.
didn't
Are You
realize
Afraid of
that.
the Dark and
Yeah,
Goosebumps and all that stuff? Yep, right
I
down
didn't
there.
realize that Samurai Pizza Cast was dubbed here. Like, I had no idea.
God, Samurai
Like
Pizza Cat.
in Montreal by some actors that I now know and had no idea. And Beast Wars was made in Vancouver, and Dragon Ball Z was all dubbed in Vancouver and stuff, and Sailor Moon was dubbed in Toronto, and all this stuff that I was always kind of like, yeah, I guess I'm Canadian. I'm like, all these years I should have been like, fuck yeah, I'm Canadian. Look at all this shit made here, but
Yeah,
did not make the connection. So it just goes to show, if you want to be famous in a states, you got to kind of like be Canadian on the down low, such as Ryan Reynolds and our many other exports that don't walk around rocking hockey jerseys and Canadian accents. So
for sure. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Ryan.
yeah. Yeah, well, thanks. I know this interview was a little short, but I appreciate you coming by regardless. And
Not a problem at all. It's a little short. You've heard my podcast; they're like 30 minutes.
is
I'm the
that
king.
intentional?
I'm
Is
the
that
king of the
intentional?
micro podcast. I was always big on the bite-sized podcast content. I
Mm,
figure, keep them coming back for more.
that's true.
Also, just because I edit meticulously, so like horror movie night
Yeah.
episodes, we'll record for like an hour, and then I'll just go through and be like, "This joke sucked. This tangent went nowhere," and just like, and
That's
just
what I like about the
trim
live thing, man. I don't give a
it.
fuck. It's
I
like, yeah.
we're gonna do a live. Oh my god. Okay, last promotion.
Plug the shit out of
Real quick.
yourself, dude. It's why you're here.
YouTube.com/Geekscape TV. It's the YouTube channel that I run for the Geekscape Network. On December 17th at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will be doing a 16-hour long live stream event to raise money for the Big Brothers Big Sisters Foundation of Central and Northern New Jersey. We've got a bunch of cool people lined up. There's going to be a music trivia game show featuring Krista Makes, Linus of Hollywood from Nerf Herder, and Leonore Jeff the Girl of Five Iron Frenzy. We're going to do live podcasts. There's going to be live music. We're going to do Geekscape's 15-year anniversary live episode in a small little black box theater out of Los Angeles. There's going to be a ton of guests there. And then the whole event will be closed out by Scott Kloppenstein of Real Big Fish's band, The Littlest Man Band, performing an hour set on the live stream. So please check it out. Please donate to Big Brothers Big Sisters. It's an amazing organization. And just subscribe to the channel. You'll get all the notifications about it as things come out. But yeah, that's like, I've been dedicating the last like 2 months of my life to organizing this fucking thing. So I can't
Fuck
believe
yeah,
I
man.
didn't even think to mention it. Yeah, please, 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 for the love of God, support this thing. But there's going to be a horror movie night live. We're going to record our Christmas episode live on that stream, and it's going to be one of the few times that I release something unedited onto our feed, which is very scary for me because I am such a meticulous editor that just letting it cut loose is anxiety inducing to me, frankly. But
Dude, if you do live broadcast for a fucking year, like I said, I'm an editor by trade. It's not that I don't give a fuck anymore, but once you live with the idea that the shit out there is not meticulously edited and stuff like that, it's actually kind of relieving. It's just like, what can you
yeah,
do?
Just
Yeah.
there. It's just there.
Because the skill
When
set's there. It's
yeah.
there. It's built in you, man. It's like, you're gonna go on autopilot, and autopilot in your case is really fucking good. So,
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for watching Ryan's Stick Show. Those of you who stuck around with us, and those of you who are just joining and watching after the fact and all that other stuff, or watching 5 years from now, make sure you check out the Geekscape Network and the wonderful, wonderful podcast. I personally love One Hit Thunder because, it's baffling to me sometimes when people only have that one big moment in the sun, but that moment in the sun seems to burn forever. And it's, yeah. One hit wonders are a wonderful thing, especially when you get to the nitty gritty like they do and the stories behind it. The Monster Mash episode was fucking awesome. I had no idea that guy milked that fucking melody so many times.
The Monster Swim? Yeah, no, he kept doing it.
I can't remember if it's on One Hit Thunder. I can't remember, but Chris Fafalios went on this rant about the Christmas shoes. It might have been the
That was on a After Hours
after.
episode of Krista Makes. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the funniest fucking thing. I like Chris Fafalios is almost like he's like Kermit the Frog if no one's fucking with him. Like he's such a go-getter, and his
Yeah.
positivity is infectious. So I love listening to him, but to hear him go off on a fucking song called The Christmas Shoes was fucking awesome.
That so many people posted about that. That was maybe that Chris and I have been trying to figure out why like there was such a huge jump in numbers for One Hit Thunder, and I wonder if it was the Christmas shoes freak out just made people be like, I need more Chris Falios in my life.
Fuck yeah, man. Well, people are listening because it's a great show, and it's produced like crazy. And in a sense where I'm like, what I love about your shows is that you really respect your audience's time. And people out there on YouTube and like whatever, I'm a fucking YouTube failure if you want to look at it in a viewership comparison. But at the same time, some of the people that get millions of views and they play with their hair for like 10 seconds at a time in the middle of an unedited episode, I'm sorry,
Yes.
kids, but I'm not going to just make YouTube videos that says Kevin Smith destroyed by critics. And I'm not going to waste your time. That's it.
No, 100%. There
No.
was something that Chris said to me one time about One Hit Thunder, and
Mm,
I kind of agree with him, but he's like, I love listening to our own show, and I hope that people love listening to it for the same reason that like because we stick so strict to like our there's an ad in the front, then you hear a little bit of the song that we're going to talk about with the voiceover, and then it goes into the theme song, and then there's a big discussion, and then we hear a punchline song with like you talking at the end of it. Like he's like, it's such a familiar territory that it's like
yeah.
I feel the warm blanket every time I listen to it. And it's like I try to bring that with every show that I make. Like I want people to get into the rhythm of the show early on and then just
Mm,
kind of be like, oh, this is home. Like I know exactly when I hit play that I'm gonna hear the kickoff of this theme song and they're gonna, Matt's gonna have his same introductory speech that he does at the start of every episode, and then they're gonna have their goofy talk, but then they're gonna talk about their double features and they're going to talk about their what did they watch this week, and then that beautiful closing music is going to come back in, and like I do think that there's something very comforting about that, and maybe it's from decades of growing up on sitcoms, but like there is a real comfort in like a set pattern that you're going in for every single week that I hope
mhm.
other people connect to it the same way that I always did. But
Absolutely. All right, man. Thank you very much for everyone for watching all this time. We appreciate it. And yeah, subscribe to podcasts. They're free.
yeah,
Validate this fucker's efforts,
please,
everybody. It's a
please.
button. It's a fucking button. And if you have some extra time, give them a 4-star review, because why the fuck not?
Yeah. And hit up a
Yeah.
Patreon if you want. If you like his show, see if they got a Patreon. Throw them $1 or 2 maybe.
What do you when okay, well, on that note, horror movie night, what's on your Patreon for that, man? What
Oh
what can
man,
people
so
expect from you?
we got a bunch of different tiers. So there's a
Mm,
$1 tier that's kind of just a hey, thanks for supporting us. There's really no specials that go with that. For
mm,
$3, you get a newsletter once a month, breaking down all the movies that are going to be coming out in the coming months, so you can prepare and watch them and get ready for that. And
cool.
also in that, Scott will send you a song a month from his back catalog or stuff that's going to be released in the near future. For $5 a month, you get a bonus episode every single week of the show.
I like
Um,
that.
For $10 a month, you get every episode a week earlier than the rest of the world. And for $15 a month, you get every episode a week earlier than the rest of the world in a completely unedited video file. So you can actually see us recording the episode flubs and all, and see all the stuff that I cut out and see like where the extra 20 minutes went on the episode. But the other big thing is that whether you're a $1 Patreon or a $15 Patreon, you do get to vote once a month on what movie we discuss for the Patreon bonus episode. So this month it's Bubble Boy, starring Jake Gyllenhaal. It's always a non-horror film that you can choose for us to sit and
Mhm.
watch. Last month it was Dick Tracy. So each one of us picks a movie, puts up a poll, and then all of you vote for which one we end up sitting through. So definitely check that out. And I mean, I'll announce it here, but starting tomorrow, we're launching a One Hit Thunder Patreon page, where for the $3 tier, you vote for a song that we'll cover on the live feed at least once a month. We'll let Patreon pick the song for us. And then $5 tier, you'll start to get bonus episodes. And then again, the $10 tier, you'll get the episodes before everybody else. You'll get it a couple days before everybody else. So that's
Nice.
dropping. That's officially launching. I'll be announcing that. I want to wait until maybe Friday or so. I just don't want anyone to get charged yet because we really won't start the Patreon content until
Yeah,
January 1st. So I want to get past where they would charge people's cards and then
gotcha.
start promoting it. But yeah, One Hit
Well,
Thunder. Check it out. It's a pretty good show, I think.
wait. Fuck yeah, it's a good show. And yeah, all right, everybody. So as you heard, great podcast. Check them out. They're free. And if you want to, throw Matt here some skin, he definitely, him and his team work tirelessly hours every single week to deliver you the utmost high quality content. And they're not like me. They don't they don't just push a button and wing it. All these podcasts are extremely well researched, and as much fun as they're having, there's always a lot of thought and care behind it. Trust me, I've heard and seen enough shows to know the difference. So, as a viewer and listener, I appreciate the effort that you and your team put in to making your content, because there is kind of a shift between some people where viewership and narcissism make them not want to try as hard, but we come from the generation of if you try they will come, and hopefully even more people will. Congratulations on what you've done so far. I look forward to the next chapter in the life of Matt Kelly, because so far it's been wonderful, and I'm sure that the future has nothing but good things in store for you.
Thank you so much. And obviously, the last thing I always want to leave people with is if you're ever sad, if you're ever feeling anything where you are in a dark, bad place, it is okay to reach out for help. It's okay to talk to a therapist, try meditation, do whatever. Your life matters. That's the biggest thing I can put out there. Over 3 hours, you've been sticking through all of this with us talking about all different types of podcasting stuff. Your life matters. Make sure that you're protecting it at all costs.
Awesome. All right. Those were beautiful words. We're going to end it right there. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.